EU citizens living in the UK without visas will now face the real threat of deportation.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Friday the 20th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. Here are your top stories this morning.
Well, GB News can exclusively reveal immigration enforcement officers will start cracking down on EU citizens who are living and working in the UK without the right paperwork. But what's that going to mean for our post-Brexit relationship with the rest of the EU?
We'll also have the results of our latest People's Poll as we ask, do you agree with how the government has dealt with Scotland's gender recognition bill?
As firefighters, frontline workers taking strike action this winter, a report this morning will reveal where the best and worst fire services are across the country. There are also concerns as to whether cuts in the service are leading to avoidable loss of life.
Well, as ever, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now we start with the fact that GB News can reveal EU citizens living and working in the UK without a visa will now face the real prospect of arrest.
Yes, immigration enforcement officers have been issued with new guidance allowing for the detention and removal of those EU nationals who are working here illegally.
Well, our Home and Security editor Mark White was given exclusive access to follow immigration officers as they raided businesses in London, arresting 2 EU citizens from Romania who officers said were in the UK without their work visas.
We're on board with immigration officers in South East London as they prepare to raid several businesses suspected of employing illegal immigrants. Arriving at this skip hire firm, these officers have to move fast if they're to stop their suspects disappearing. Searching all the possible hiding places as they go. Among those they're looking for, at least 2 Albanians. Immigration enforcement officers believe one of the men has run off.
Yeah, have you got a picture of him?
The other is behind the wheel of this vehicle, but a quick check reveals he has a proper work visa. Elsewhere, the rest of the workforce have gathered in this porta cabin as immigration officers check their status.
We're going to take you into this room and just speak to you in here, yeah?
After speaking to this Romanian, he was placed under arrest on suspicion of working in the UK without a proper visa. The senior immigration enforcement officer here told us they've now been issued with new guidance, allowing for the arrest of EU nationals living and working here illegally. Conservative MP Lee Anderson, who's on the Commons Home Affairs Select Committee, welcomed this apparent change in policy.
Well, it's welcome news because if EU citizens are here and they are working and they should not be working, then quite frankly they're breaking the law. And this problem is much bigger than we think, I believe. I believe that this is happening up and down the country, in every town and village and city. There's a hidden population of people who are working that should not be working.
Following Brexit, EU nationals arriving in the UK must have the appropriate visas if they want to live and work here. And although border officials have detained some EU nationals at ports and airports, they suspect of planning to work here illegally. Those EU citizens already in the UK, but working without permission, have not been pursued by immigration enforcement until now. At a second nearby business, immigration officers have arrested another Romanian suspected of working illegally. It signals a tougher approach from Rishi Sunak's government after he promised to crack down on those abusing UK immigration laws. But with well over 1 million people suspected of living and working in the illegal economy, these immigration enforcement officers have never been busier. Mark White, GB News, South East London.
Well, let's get some reaction now from immigration lawyer Skylar McKeith. Good morning to you, Skylar. I mean, this does signal, doesn't it, a tougher approach from Border Force. What's your reaction?
It is definitely a tough approach now. The way that it works is EU citizens coming to the UK to work following Brexit must now obtain work visas. And those resident in the UK before Brexit went into effect needed to apply to the EU settlement scheme to obtain either pre-settled or settled status to continue being able to live and work in the UK. Now, a lot of EU citizens did not realise that if they obtained pre-settled status, that they then had to reapply for settled status after living in the UK for 5 years. So that's one issue. The other issue is that people might be so desperate that they have no choice but to work. And so the immigration rules should potentially be expanded to make it easier for people to obtain work permissions. But there is a problem with the mechanism of the EU settlement scheme, which the High Court actually found breaches the withdrawal agreement. So and also on the flip side, it is very costly as well for employers to sponsor workers for UK visas. And then, of course, there are some people and businesses attempting to circumvent the immigration rules, which clearly is an issue from an immigration standpoint.
I mean, you can understand why some people are going to be very upset by this, right? However,
Absolutely.
but isn't it fair to say that these? I mean, if people aren't aware of the legal situation at the moment, that's no excuse, is it? I mean, there's been actually a substantial grace period for people to sort this out before the government's now starting to move in and enforce the law.
Yes, there was quite a generous grace period. I have actually spoken to people that didn't even realise, they didn't even know. So that is a huge problem. And so there are people here that didn't even know. And then, of course, there are people here that do know exactly what they're doing and they're just trying to circumvent the rules. All UK employers do have the responsibility of preventing illegal working. And UK employers are required to conduct regular right-to-work checks to ensure that the individual they are employing has the right to work. So employers in breach of the rules may face both civil and criminal penalties for doing so. Employers could face substantial fines in the thousands and also prosecution of up to imprisonment of up to 5 years, actually. So in addition, the employers could face businesses being forced to cease trading and disqualification of the company directors. So an employer who fails to do the correct checks may also be in breach, in addition to an employer who knowingly employed illegal workers.
How does it work then? Because, I mean, we just heard there from Mark White, this is a huge issue to tackle. It's 1 million people living here illegally from the EU. Does it work in the sense that it comes from a tip-off, or is it through employer checks? Or is this more just immigration raids? I mean, it just seems like such a huge issue to tackle. I don't know how you even go about starting that.
It can result as of a tip-off. You can submit a form online to inform the Home Office. It can also result due to the right to work checks. So I've actually come across some employers who didn't even realise they were employing illegal workers. They had just assumed that their employee was legal in this country. They assumed their employee applied to the EU settlement scheme, and they actually hadn't. They had put it off, and the employer was employing someone unlawfully. So that is an issue on both the part of the employer and the employee, because the employer has a requirement to check that the employee that they are hiring actually is legal to work in this country.
OK, Skylar, good to talk to you. We're going to catch up with you a little bit later on, I know, but for now, thanks very much indeed. Your thoughts on that will be very welcome this morning. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Is it fair? Well, perhaps. Or maybe you think, if these people have been actually living here in the UK for a long time, well, maybe they should just be left alone. But if they haven't got the right paperwork, settled status and a work visa, then should they just be allowed to carry on? 1 million people, it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. It's a big task, isn't it? Let us know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Now, the results of the latest GB News People's Poll are out, and once again, they reveal a valuable insight into the state of the nation.
Following the government's blocking of Scotland's gender reform bill, it's no surprise that we're going to start there.
Yeah, we can reveal that 22% of you strongly support the government's blocking of the bill, compared to 18% who said they were strongly opposed to the decision.
Well, despite the mixed views on the reform bill, a vast majority of people asked said they believe that 16 years old is simply too young to change their gender. 41% completely agreed, compared to only 8% who said they completely disagreed that 16 years old is too young.
OK, let's try to pack it all with the co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albie Amankona, who's here. Good to see you, Albie.
Good morning.
What is interesting, I think, in this is the number of people, I mean, it's split pretty evenly, who think the government are either right or wrong to enforce Section 35, is it?
Yes, Section 35.
To block what has been voted through in the Scottish Parliament. So it's not, regardless of their views of the bill itself, it's whether they think the British government is acting in the right way.
And I think that's the core question. It's a very mixed polling result that we've seen from this GBNews poll. And I think it is mostly, not necessarily because of the subject of gender recognition reform, but whether or not the government was right to invoke this Section 35 action, which has never been invoked before in the whole history of the Scottish Parliament post-devolution, I think in 1999, if I remember correctly, and whether or not it's right for Westminster to essentially override what Nicola Sturgeon would call the will of the Scottish people, because, of course, this was on the manifesto of the Scottish National Party in the last Scottish national elections.
So mixed views on the government's response, but it does seem that the majority agree that 16 years old is too young to change your gender. That seemed pretty clear from the poll, didn't it?
Yes, that did seem quite clear from the poll. And this is actually one of the sticking points that you hear people speaking about quite a lot, whether or not 16 years old is too young to be changing gender. Of course, in Scotland, they would argue, well, they can vote in Scottish elections at 16, and so why can't they decide to change their gender at 16? Obviously, here in England and in the rest of the UK in general elections, the voting age is 18. So there are some discrepancies between England and Scotland with regards to the ages to do things. But I think the general consensus of the British public is that 16 is too young. They want the medical diagnosis to remain, and they think the 3-month period that you have to live in your desired gender is actually too short, and that 2 years, which is the current scheme, is the right amount of time.
I mean, we're told the government is bringing in the Section 35 unwillingly, that there is a sort of legal necessity for it because of the way, obviously, someone who changed their gender between the ages of 16 and 18 in Scotland, if they then came to England, how legally that would work. Is that a legitimate argument, do we think? I mean, it all gets very, very complicated.
It does get very complicated. You get people on either side of the argument talking about different things. I think one of the major sticking points is that by bringing the age down to 16, it throws up a lot of complications with schooling. Because at the moment, with the age to acquire a gender recognition certificate being 18, there is actually no intersection with what happens at school in the United Kingdom at the moment. For example, if there were single-sex schools and a boy who changed his gender into becoming a woman or a girl at that age wanted to go to a girls' school, that doesn't happen at the moment because the age is 18. Whereas if Scotland was to bring the age down to 16, that would throw up all of these problems, especially in the schooling area. So there are some very specific issues around bringing the age down to 16, which don't exist at the moment because it's 18.
And support for the Conservatives remains at a historic low of just 21%. That's not a pleasant sight for the Tories, is it?
No, look, no Conservative strategist is going to be looking at the polls at the moment and feeling happy. But equally, I don't think they'll be surprised that we are at 21% in the polls for the Conservative Party. Because if we look at some of the macroeconomic headwinds that this government is facing, high inflation, cost of living crisis, global economic slowdown just off the back of a pandemic, any incumbent government, and indeed incumbent governments around the world, are suffering at the polls. And I would probably say to Conservative strategists, if a week is a long time in politics, 18 months until the next general election, a lot could happen, so I wouldn't write the Tories off just yet.
No, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because you hear a lot. I was listening to some international reports over the last week, and you hear it from people in every country that's going through what we're going through. It's the government's fault, they say, and it's what people are visiting. High inflation, it's the government's fault. Well, of course, it isn't the government's fault. But why is it that messaging, that they must be trying to get through to say, well, this is a global situation, it's driven by all these various factors, it's not down to us. Why does that message never get through, whichever country you're in, actually?
Well, because I think it's perfectly reasonable for ordinary citizens and voters to feel that governments are supposed to work to try and shield their citizens from these global macroeconomic headwinds. And so whenever they happen, whether or not it's a global force or a natural disaster, the people in charge are the people who get the blame. If we go back to the 2008 financial crisis, that was a global crisis, but it was Labour who was in power then, and they were languishing in the polls. So whenever we have these situations of global crises, we do tend to see the incumbent government suffering whilst the opposition soars.
OK, Albie, for now, thank you very much indeed.
OK, let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today. And Lancashire police are reportedly looking into the video of Rishi Sunak not wearing a seatbelt whilst in a moving car. The Prime Minister was filming a social media clip on his way to yesterday's levelling up announcement in the northwest. He's already apologised, with his spokesman saying he made an error of judgment.
The latest deadline to restore Northern Ireland's power sharing at Stormont has passed without agreement. The UK government must now call another Assembly election within 12 weeks, but the Northern Ireland Secretary could opt to delay that in the hope the government and EU can strike a new deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Western allies from around 50 nations are meeting later today to discuss more military support for Ukraine. Last weekend, the UK became the first nation to dispatch tanks to Ukraine. Kyiv is now seeking another 300 tanks to tackle a potential Russian counteroffensive, with Germany facing pressure to authorise the use of its Leopard 2 battle tanks.
The American singer David Crosby has died at the age of 81. He co-founded two rock bands in the 60s, The Byrds, and of course Crosby, Stills and Nash. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice because of his role in both bands. Do you know Crosby, Stills and Nash?
I'm very glad that was your story.
Yeah, I mean, I know, because it's like I know the name and I would recognise the music if I heard it, I'm sure. But
it's one of those.
I can't name a tune. But I always thought Crosby, Stills and Nash were sort of 80s, but they can't have been, because if they're 60s, I wasn't around in the 60s.
No, well, you weren't around the 60s.
So,
I wasn't around in the 80s. That explains that.
You weren't around in the 80s?
No.
That's very depressing,
Anyway,
actually.
do you know what? This does happen, though, when people pass on, and then you only learn about them afterwards. It's very sad. Yeah, it happens.
Well, they do say for a lot of musicians, the best... It's a bit depressing, actually, but the best point in their career is after they've died, in terms of sales.
Yeah.
Sales go through the roof.
Do you know what I always think about is Eva Cassidy?
Oh,
she didn't even know she was famous until after she died, but she's great.
Songbird, what a great album that is.
It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point.
Yeah,
Eva Cassidy.
Yeah, she's a good one. Anyway, we digress.
There you go, yes. Now, let's talk strikes and things, should we? Because an assessment of England's fire and rescue services is due to be published today, looking at the overall performance of the emergency provision during 2022.
Well, this morning, the Inspectorate released the third and final wave of reports from 16 fire services.
It includes a performance review of the Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service, where our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis joins us from now. Will, good morning to you. Look, first and foremost, what have we learnt from these reports?
Good morning. Yes, from a very cold Leicestershire this morning. This is the headquarters for all of Leicestershire's fire and rescue services, about 20 or so that operate here in the county. Basically, what these inspections are designed to do is to get the answers that the public would rightly expect from fire and rescue services, and His Majesty's Constabulary and His Majesty's Inspectorate for Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services spends a good chunk of time, a couple of years, looking at all of the different 44 fire services in England. And as you say, this is the third wave, so a third of the fire and rescue services that have been released in these inspections. Later on today, we are going to see the full state of service released by Andy Cook. But for right now, what we have is the report of these 16 fire services, which of course includes Leicestershire. Now, what the Inspectorate expects is that all the fire services, each individual fire service, will be graded as good. It grades them on a variety of different things, including how effective and efficient the fire service is at responding to fires and other risks, because obviously fire and rescue services don't just deal with fires, they deal with many other things as well. And so, for example, Leicestershire in this recent grading received the good grade. Just to describe a couple of the points, it improved in a number of areas since the last inspection in 2018, including in culture and diversity. It was ranked good in 9 of the 11 categories, but also that it requires improvement, including in how the service prevents fires and uses resources. Now, Callum Faint, who is the Chief Fire and Rescue Officer here in Leicestershire, said that the service had made massive steps forward in many areas, but that there are further improvements to be made. Now, as I said, there are 16 that have been inspected in this particular wave. 2 of them didn't receive those good gradings that the inspectorate expects, including in North Yorkshire. North Yorkshire, His Majesty's Inspectorate described the fire service as having deteriorated in most areas since the last inspection, and that it was inadequate at keeping people safe and secure from fire and other risks. And in how it also looks after people, there was also a little bit of concern as well because of how Cumbria has been governed in recent years, and that's something that the inspectorate highlighted. Now, we are still waiting for the state of fire rescue service that's going to come out at about 10:30, and what we see in that is going to directly relate to how we might see strike action in the near future.
Will Hollis, thanks so much for that update, and you'll be across that for us for the rest of the day.
He will indeed. There's an interesting story in The Sun today.
Oh, you find this being fun.
About pub quizzes.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Tell me.
So, I'm just asking, are you a pub quiz whiz? And they've got 20 tricky poses that you can try
Oh, yeah.
to answer, which we'll have a go at in the break.
Yeah, let's do that.
They're difficult ones. But
I think I'm quite good at a pub quiz.
When's the last time you went to a pub quiz? Did you do one recently?
Uni. No, uni.
I went to one a month ago.
Was it good?
Yeah, do you know what? I really enjoyed it.
Oh, were you very
really
good? I
enjoyed
bet
it.
you were very good.
We won.
Well, of course you did.
We won.
I was just telling Stephen,
Only by
actually.
1 point, though.
Oh, but he retains knowledge, to Stephen. He knows everything. It's like he knows everything. You'd be very good. I'd like you on my team for a
Jack
pub
of all
quiz.
trades, master of none, me.
Oh, stop.
But it's a good thing to do, and it's actually quite it's a cheap night out, really.
Yeah.
Isn't it? You go pub. I think this was £2 to enter at mine, and you won a £25 pub voucher.
That's good, isn't it?
And you know, if you have a couple of pints, and there you go.
And you can't put a price on glory. And you walked away feeling victorious, I'm sure.
Exactly. It was I felt fantastic.
Oh.
It was really nice.
I'll come with you next time.
Yeah, all right then.
We'll do a little test. We'll let you know how we get along.
Yeah, we'll let you know. Looking at these questions, I don't think I do very well on these. Look very hard.
Wow.
Oh,
We'll see.
I tell you, my best pub quiz question though is how many lakes in the Lake District?
7. Much more?
1.
Oh.
Bassenthwaite Lake. All the rest are waters, meres, and things like that.
You learn something new every day. Every day's a school day.
Windermere. It's not Lake Windermere. It's just Windermere.
Windermere. Wow.
There you go.
Every day's a school day.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to be looking at President Biden's first 2 years in office in just a moment.
Good morning. Another frosty day out there. Frosty Friday, but a sunny Friday as well. Ice is a hazard again this morning, and there's a few fog patches around, and we'll see more of those forming overnight tonight. Bit of a messy picture on the pressure pattern. We're kind of between 2 weather systems, a little bit of a ridge of high pressure, which is bringing most of us a fine day. But this low out in the North Sea is going to throw just a few showers grazing easternmost parts of England and still bring a cold wind here. Some sleet and snow still possible in those showers as well. But for most places, it's dry, it's fine. It's sunny. There are some thick fog patches around this morning, and they will take a while to clear. But for most, it's a day of feeling the apricity, the feeling of sunshine in winter. Temperatures 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, maybe 7 or 8 across the southwest. Feeling colder than that, though, with that wind along some of these North Sea coasts. And very quickly, temperatures will drop tonight. So if you're heading out, be prepared for it to be frosty. The blue taking hold of the chart. Frost pretty much everywhere. Again, a hard frost in places. And there will be some fog, probably a bit more overnight tonight, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Notice a change to damper weather as rain trickles into the far northwest. That'll help to keep the temperatures up here, but elsewhere, a cold start to the weekend. That fog, where it forms, will be slow to clear on Saturday as well, particularly across the heart of England through the Welsh Marches. So just be aware of that on Saturday. Apart from the fog, most of England and Wales looking dry and sunny on Saturday. Clouds spilling in, though, to Scotland and Northern Ireland with rain, mostly light rain, particularly in western parts of Scotland. But it is turning milder and breezier here, 7 or 8 the high, whereas for the bulk of England and Wales, 4 or 5 at best. And if the fog sticks, going to struggle to get much above freezing. Slowly but surely, these weather fronts are bringing milder air to the north. But although it'll turn milder here on Sunday, it stays cold in the southeast.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
6:27. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, it's been 2 years since Joe Biden became the 46th president of the United States, but he's now halfway through his first term. It's gone really quickly, hasn't it? And the 80-year-old is under increasing pressure from a hostile Congress and media.
Well, speaking just a few hours ago, he said he has no regrets about the way he's handled the discovery of classified documents. It's the latest scandal, of course, found at his property in November from his time when he was vice president.
As we found a handful of documents were filed in the wrong place. We immediately turned them over to the archives of the Justice Department. We're fully cooperating, looking forward to getting this resolved quickly. I think you're going to find there's nothing there. I have no regrets. I'm following what the lawyers have told me they want me to do. It's exactly what we're doing. There's no there. Thank you.
Well, let's talk to columnist for the Los Angeles Times, Michael Hiltzik, who joins us now. Really good to see you this morning. It's fascinating, isn't it? Because a little bit like Trump, when he actually carried out quite a lot during his presidency, we know that Biden's done quite a lot, actually, during his first 2 years. But that all seems to get overshadowed by the fact he seems as though he's not doing a great deal, certainly from an international perspective.
Well, I think it's probably fair to say that the Democratic Party in general is very good at enacting measures that help ordinary Americans, but very bad at communicating their accomplishments to ordinary Americans. And we've seen this for several decades, and it's true now. But I think the message probably is getting through, and we can see that from the results of the last election in November, when Democratic candidates did much better than they were expected to do in a cycle that generally is bad for the party that's in the White House.
Well, in the midterms, I mean, I think it surprised him as much as it did people all around the world. Do you think that is a strong Democrat side, or do you think it's more a representation of a weaker Republican side?
It's a little bit of both. The Democrats are stronger, and I think going into this election, we're stronger than the press and the Republicans wanted people to think. The Republicans ran a number of very poor candidates, weak candidates, really crazy candidates, and they paid the price. But the results were, by any measure, a spectacular triumph for Democrats in a midterm election that they were expected to lose really a lot. So instead, they gained a seat or two in the Senate. They maintained a narrow minority in the House of Representatives, and I think they're in good shape.
I mean, it's interesting because we're 2 years in means we're only 2 years out. And we know you Americans like to run a long presidential campaign. At the moment, we're looking at, I mean, you know, from what they're both saying, we're looking at Trump versus Biden again, aren't we? And yet, do the American people really want two old men going head-to-head on this? Or is it time for younger blood, more dynamism to have a shot at the White House?
Yes, I think both parties are really looking for the next generation of leaders. It's a little early to say whether Biden's going to run. Trump has said he's going to run, but as you said, it's 2 years away. Anything can happen. We don't really know who the candidates are going to be. Biden hasn't said. I think there's a fair expectation that he won't run, or that he'll clear the way for a next generation candidate in 2024.
Classified documents at Biden's house and office, will that have an impact on whether or not he decides to run in 2024?
Oh, I don't think so. The political press and the political public has a fairly short memory span for minor ginned-up scandals like this. I think Biden is beginning to make the case, and the case is being heard, that this is not the same thing as what Trump has done. Trump lied about classified documents. He hid them. He refused to turn them over. Biden's team has been very proactive. The moment they discovered these documents, they notified the authorities, and they turned them over right away. So there is a difference. I think that difference is really beginning to leak through to the public, and by a few months from now, this will long be forgotten.
Okay, we shall see. Michael, really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Well,
thanks for having me.
Thank you. Stay with us because there's lots more to come, including a look through all of the biggest stories from today's papers with Liz Kershaw and Fraser Myers.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 6:36. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Good morning.
Yes, and welcome back. Let's take a look at today's front pages. And the Times leads with speculation that Jeremy Hunt wants to extend the 5p fuel duty cut for another year.
Oh, let's hope so. The Guardian says Conservative constituencies have been given more cash on average from the Levelling Up Fund than their Labour voting counterparts.
The Mail appeals to the government to cut taxes following claims that the economy has turned a corner.
The Eye has reports the EU is keen to see Sir Keir Starmer become Prime Minister.
And finally, The Mirror focuses on the disturbing case of 3 Met officers accused of possessing child abuse images.
OK, let's go through the papers in a bit more detail with the Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Let's kick off with The Mirror, Liz, should we? And looking at these, of course, we've got to be very careful how we talk about it, but 3 police officers accused over child abuse images.
Yeah, one committed suicide, didn't he, in Buckinghamshire, just the day before he was due to present himself to be charged at a police station. So obviously he couldn't face what was going to happen. The other 2 have been retired 10 years. So that's 2013. The offences are said to have been committed not that long ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So they're out of the force when they were allegedly carrying out these searches on Google, etc., and appalling images of children. So they're not active police officers. So you could go to phew, I feel like I trust the police now, because GB News has done a poll, hasn't it, on public trust in the police. I just think more and more stories come out all the time about misogyny and violence and sex crimes committed by police officers, not referring to this case, but other cases have been convicted, proven, and sentencing. And you just have to wonder about the calibre of some of the people that are allowed into the police with very scanty checks. I mean, the Met Police are going back now, aren't they, and checking on people's criminal records. You'd think that was a kind of
that should have been done
foundation, yeah.
I just think it's what's very difficult with all of this. I mean, you've got to root out the bad apples.
Yeah.
But you've got to be very careful.
Yeah.
What it doesn't do is taint the vast majority who are excellent police officers.
Yeah, I agree. It must be miserable if you're a genuinely sincere, professional, law-abiding policeman and your colleagues are going down like flies. But I do think that, and it was mentioned with the case of the Metropolitan Police this week, people have to... There's also a feeling that nobody reports anything. You know, if you think something's unacceptable, people are being encouraged to whistleblow. It's very difficult, especially some of the stories I've read this week from female police officers who try and report what's happened to them. Some of them have even been driven out of their jobs because of it. So the culture has to change, where it's just not acceptable. And like the guy this week that was convicted of many offences, sexual offences, I won't repeat his nickname, but if you worked alongside a colleague who had a nickname like that, you'd think, oh, maybe there's something not quite right about this bloke,
Well,
wouldn't you?
same with Wayne Couzens, wasn't it? He had a similar sort of nickname. I mean, like you say, it does seem to be deeply ingrained in the culture.
It's hindsight, isn't it? This is the thing.
I think historically it's been a very macho male career, and the more women that are involved and the more women that can have the confidence to highlight what's going on, the better. But it's been a very macho, and also it's all about power, has been discussed this week. If you give somebody authority, it can go to their heads.
Yeah.
And also my dad, I remember as a kid, he always had a thing. He said, you know, policing, it attracts a certain type of person. You know, they want to have authority over their peers, over the general public. So I think the recruitment process needs seriously looking at.
And I mean, we could hear a lot more now. I mean, like you say, the more women and men that come forward, then, you know, more stories will come out. And I think 800 officers are being investigated at the moment by the Met, 1,000 claims of sexual abuse. Is it time that we reform the Met, or at least look into this misogynistic culture?
I mean, the Met is clearly a failing institution. I mean, there's barely a day goes by without some new horror story, some new police officer found to have committed horrendous crimes, or simply failing to tackle crime. That's, you know, that's another important aspect of this. A lot of people feel as if, you know, if you get something nicked, a police officer is not going to take any interest in you. So there's that side of it too. So the public are seriously being let down here.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people would agree. Look, let's move on, though.
OK.
On to the Express, Fraser, and hopes for the economy. We're winning the inflation battle, says the front page.
I mean, the front page is pretty extraordinary. I mean, it's really quite triumphalist. It's like, get the champagne corks out now. And the actual, you know, inflation figures, they've gone from, what, 10.7% to 10.5%. So I wouldn't get too excited too early.
But moving in the right direction, as DJs would say.
Yeah, there's some positive noises that, you know, the Bank of England chief saying he reckons inflation could come down quite quickly by the middle of the year. But we're still forecast to have a recession. So, you know.
Well, they keep saying that, but none of the figures have...
There was a slight, there was a slight uptick this winter because of the World Cup, which surprised people.
Because the Bank of England was saying we'd be in recession by now.
By now,
we don't appear to be.
We don't. Well, it's not looking good. It's still, you know, growth is still very slow. We're not. We should be really growing quite quickly by now after the pandemic is over. Hopefully the energy crisis will abate slightly, although that could go on for a bit longer. I think the other problem is that the government itself doesn't really have much of a plan. So that's the other theme of a lot of the papers. There's no sense of direction from Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt of how to grow the economy. It's purely about managing the kind of fiscal situation, which is no good for the long term.
Well, maybe. But the Mail, Liz, saying... They're jumping the gun a little bit, aren't they? Saying, well, the economy's on the turn, so let's lower taxes. Well, not yet.
The Governor of the Bank of England was a lot more optimistic yesterday as well. And the pound's been going up this week. And I would also say, let's put it into perspective. I tweeted this week a list of having done a bit of research, a list of the inflation rates in the 27 countries in the EU, because it's all very well, as I think you were mentioning earlier, just everybody blames our government, and I'm not making a party political point here. I'm simply saying, and the thing that shocked me was the number of people. I'm just checking the figures now. The number of people on Twitter who thanked me for sharing these stats because they had no perspective at all. If you live in this country, it's not widely reported what's going on elsewhere. And you get the impression that we're tanking and the rest of the world is doing well. OK. Yeah. So I just put in where the UK is. I couldn't fit all 27 countries and statistics into my one tweet. But, you know, for instance, inflation rates for 12 months to the end of November. That's the most up-to-date there was for Europe. Now, I'd also like to emphasise that when we say there's an inflation rate of 10.5%, it's for 12 months. Prices aren't going up 10.5% a month.
No.
It's often represented to scare people watching it on, thinking, oh my God, 10.5% just in November. No. Anyway, across the rest of Europe, just briefly, this is when we were at 10.7% in November. The average across the EU of the 27 was 11.1. So, hello. And then above us, I won't go through all the numbers, look at me Twitter, Hungary, 23.1%. And then these are all the Northern and Eastern Europe countries, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, 21 point odd, Czech Republic, 17, Poland, 16, Croatia, we're now down to 13, Italy, 12.6%, Germany, 11.3%, Netherlands, 11.3%. We're all in this together because of the external forces upon us, which is war and you know, consequent food and gas shortages and increasing prices. So
yeah, well, we are. But I have to say, as much as I would love taxes to be reduced, I really would.
Yeah, it cost me £5 just to Euston the other day.
But I don't know if now is the time. I think we might have to wait 6 months or so before we even get a look in on that, which is probably the sensible way forward.
It's a bit scary, as Fraser pointed out, when the economy avoided recession by increasing by 0.5% because we had a football match and everybody bought beer. That's hardly, you know, manufacturing, is it? It's hardly a solid base.
Well, no, but if it works, it works.
Gets cash into the economy, yeah. Right, Fraser, let's go to you, shall we? This has caused a bit of controversy this week, hasn't it? The levelling up cash and the way that it's been divvied out has been called the Hunger Games by some of the papers. Tell us a bit more about this.
Well, so there's accusations that certain Tory seats, particularly Tory marginal seats, ones that they are looking to retain at the next election, have been getting more levelling up funding than sort of equivalent Labour seats that are as equally deprived. I suppose there's a sort of inevitability of this kind of pork barrel politics, if you like, when you have this kind of scheme where people, different towns and cities have to they put their projects in and they have to bid for the levelling up funding. It's also, you know, the levelling up agenda seems to have been quite stalled, or, I mean, does it mean anything is the other thing. A lot of people don't actually understand what it's driving at. It seems to be a kind of slogan in search of a policy. So I remember reading the levelling up white paper, and it seems to include everything from things you might expect, like new shiny research centres, which obviously could drive growth, to things like cleaning up chewing gum and graffiti, which is a nice thing, but it's not going to be a driver of economic growth. And, you know, it's not going to solve our kind of problems of regional inequality. And we do have real problems. You know, we're basically, the difference between the north and the south of England is getting to be like East and West Germany after the fall of the wall.
But it's also, there's in one of the papers today, the claims that if you're going to get more levelling up cash if you're a Tory voting area than you are a Labour vote. Now, that seems almost counterintuitive, actually, because if you want to convince people to vote for you, then...
Or are they trying to pay back the dividend of all those new voters? You know, the people who trusted the Tories for the first time, a lot of them in those kind of red...
I know which way you're going to lose on that sort of game, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. You can't bribe people to vote for you anyway. That never works.
Well, one of the winners in this is Wigan, and nobody's ever going to win a seat as a Tory in Wigan. I mean, that's the safest, one of the safest Labour seats ever. And Morecambe, which is why I got a visit yesterday, they've had plenty of money. Blackpool's getting a new university.
Morecambe's desperate.
Yeah, but also people say, oh, it's going to the southeast. Well, yeah, but it's going to places like Margate, the Isle of Sheppey, Folkestone, Hastings. They're very deprived. They're places where people have been sent by the system, dumped, you know, in houses of multiple occupancy on benefits, and they're really run down. The piers falling down, the housing. If you go to Margate, which is supposed to be the shining star now of gentrification, go beyond the seafront where all the art galleries and vintage shops are, and in bijou cafes, and it's just, you know, bleak and dismal. So it's not fair to say, oh, we only need the money up north.
No, it's not fair, as you say.
I think the coastal towns, wherever they are, north or south, are some of the most needy. Yeah,
they are.
Blackpool, I think. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, Blackpool is like the most deprived town in the UK. And if you're a man from Blackpool, you will have a life expectancy 9 years below the UK national average. So the kind of imperative to sort this out, to deal with our inequalities, is real. It's just a shame that sort of levelling up or what passes for it is just not going to get us there.
Well, no. We've got to leave it there. Liz, Fraser, thank you both very much indeed. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Now, Alec Baldwin, excuse me, is to be charged with
involuntary manslaughter over the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the set of the film Rust. Well, the film's armourer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, who was responsible for weapons on set, is also facing the same charge.
Well, let's talk to Showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield. I mean, this is certainly a turn that, we know the family of Miss Hutchins are pleased about. The Baldwins, saying they're going to fight it every step of the way?
Right, and what I think is so interesting is they also charged the assistant director, David Halls, with the exact same thing, but he took a plea deal and is going to actually testify against both the prop master and Alec Baldwin. So I'm imagining they're very uncomfortable by that. But you also wonder, was Alec Baldwin and the prop master given the same option of the plea deal? Because, you know, this is a very small little community. They've never had an incident like this happen. Did they really want to go up against this movie star that has talked nonstop to the press, insisting on his innocence? So it's interesting. Is Alec Baldwin looking to take this all the way to court because he really truly believes in his innocence? Did he reject a plea deal? That's what we're all discussing here in the United States, that option.
And Kinsey, it's really interesting, isn't it, the district attorney's comment saying, on my watch, nobody is above the law and everyone deserves justice. It's very pointed comments there, isn't it, towards a very well-known actor.
And another comment that the district attorney made was that Alec Baldwin was not just being charged as an actor that received a prop and pointed it at somebody. Alec Baldwin is being charged as one of the producers. And here in Hollywood, people are saying, look, anybody can be considered a producer. You can, throw money at a production and get a producer's credit. Is he really to blame ultimately? And I do think that this is a tough case for Alec Baldwin because he has a reputation for having, a tough temper. He is difficult to get along with. And I think that to prove to a jury full of strangers that, of his innocence, I think that might be tough for him.
What does he face should he be found guilty?
Now, this is interesting. It's 18 months in jail and a $5,000 fine. So, I mean, the thing is, this was not an intentional death. Obviously, there was no motivation here, that he did not intentionally do this. But that does seem like nothing for somebody's life, right? I mean, it's almost devastating. But the reality is, I really highly doubt that he would have to do either one of those things.
Production of the film was set to resume this year, wasn't it? Do you think that will still go ahead now that we're hearing about these charges, or do you think that the film shouldn't ever be finished?
Well, it's interesting because Stephen said that the family is, happy for this charge, while he's absolutely right. They actually did come out in support of it and say they're glad nobody's, there's nobody too important up against the law. Her husband is actually producing the movie now. So isn't that strange? There was a civil court case, Alec Baldwin settled, and now her husband, Helena Hutchins' husband, is a producer on the project. So I think it would be in poor taste to continue. I'm sure that this court case will have a lot to do with what actually comes to fruition there. But a devastating story, really unnecessary. And it makes you think, should we really be using real guns on movie sets? Why are we not using prop guns all the time?
Well, I think that's a very valid question. Kinsey, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much indeed. Loads of you getting in touch on our report from Mark White on EU citizens who are here in the UK but haven't got now the right paperwork post-Brexit, now facing the possibility of being deported. Keith says, I live in Greece. Morning, Keith. After Brexit, we had to apply for a residence permit. It was a straightforward process, common knowledge. Without a permit, you can only spend 180 days a year in the UK. Without residency, you can't legally work. So what's happening in the UK is no different from what's happening in the rest of Europe.
Margaret's been in touch. Good morning to you, Margaret. It's all very well cracking down on EU citizens working illegally, but what about all the illegal immigrants that are costing the country millions? So is this Rishi's idea of cracking down on illegal workers when there's thousands more illegals that are working for the drugs trade? Ignorance is no excuse, which is what these people are going to claim. No doubt lawyers will use this excuse to defend these people, which will cost us taxpayers thousands again.
And similar thoughts from Dean, in a way. He says, I'm more bothered about the thousands of illegal migrants coming here. At least the EU immigrants are working, albeit illegally, and not costing us money to stay here. Which, again, is a valid point. I suppose what you could say is if they're not meant to be here, but of course it's using, schools, local council resources, NHS, all the rest of it. But anyway, keep your thoughts coming through. GBviews at gbnews.uk, and we'll bring you more on that exclusive report in just a moment.
Good morning. Another frosty day out there. Frosty Friday, but a sunny Friday as well. Ice is a hazard again this morning, and there's a few fog patches around, and we'll see more of those forming overnight tonight. Bit of a messy picture on the pressure pattern. We're kind of between two weather systems, a little bit of a ridge of high pressure, which is bringing most of us a fine day. But this low out in the North Sea is going to throw just a few showers grazing easternmost parts of England and still bring a cold wind here. Some sleet and snow still possible in those showers as well. But for most places, it's dry, it's fine. It's sunny. There are some thick fog patches around this morning, and they will take a while to clear. But for most, it's a day of feeling the apricity, the feeling of sunshine in winter. Temperatures 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, maybe 7 or 8 across the southwest. Feeling colder than that, though, with that wind along some of these North Sea coasts. And very quickly, temperatures will drop tonight. So if you're heading out, be prepared for it to be frosty. The blue taking hold of the chart. Frost pretty much everywhere. Again, a hard frost in places. And there will be some fog, probably a bit more overnight tonight, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Notice a change to damper weather as rain trickles into the far northwest. That'll help to keep the temperatures up here, but elsewhere, a cold start to the weekend. That fog, where it forms, will be slow to clear on Saturday as well, particularly across the heart of England through the Welsh Marches. So just be aware of that on Saturday. Apart from the fog, most of England and Wales looking dry and sunny on Saturday. Clouds spilling in, though, to Scotland and Northern Ireland with rain, mostly light rain, particularly in western parts of Scotland. But it is turning milder and breezier here, 7 or 8 the high, whereas for the bulk of England and Wales, 4 or 5 at best. And if the fog sticks, going to struggle to get much above freezing. Slowly but surely, these weather fronts are bringing milder air to the north. But although it'll turn milder here on Sunday, it stays cold in the southeast.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
EU citizens living in the UK without visas will now face the real threat of deportation.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 20th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, GB News can exclusively reveal that immigration enforcement officers will start cracking down on EU citizens living and working in the UK without the right paperwork. But what will this mean for our post-Brexit relationship with the rest of Europe?
Also this morning, we'll bring you the results of our latest People's Poll as we asked, do you agree with how the government have handled Scotland's gender recognition bill?
And as the cost of flights continues to rise, we'll bring you the best bargain holidays that you can book without breaking the bank. Also, let us know if you've managed to get somewhere exotic without going overboard in the last year.
Overboard. I mean, it's not really the right turn of phrase, is it?
Yeah, it would be nice to have read that one.
Should have thought about that one.
Yeah, but if you've bagged a bargain, I think is what we're trying to say.
Yes,
do let us
bagged a
know.
bargain.
And we can help each other, because we're a GB News family here and we give each other top tips, don't we?
I booked flights to Spain, which were a very good price, about £80.
Very good.
I don't know if that's each way or not, I can't remember now. But 80, so yeah, but anyway, but that's not till June.
Oh, so there you go. So booking in
advance
is the top tip here. See, I was looking at flights to Greece, and I must say there's a report out today saying they're up 40%. I would agree with that. It was like £200, cheapest flight possible
right.
to
That's
Greece.
quite a lot.
That's one way.
One way?
Yeah.
Oh, ouch.
I think I might walk there at this rate.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Oh. Well, get in touch. Have you bagged a bargain? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, we start with the news that we can reveal that EU citizens living and working in the UK without a visa will now face the real prospect of arrest and deportation.
Immigration enforcement officers have been issued with new guidance allowing for the detention and removal of those EU nationals who are working here illegally.
Well, our Home and Security editor Mark White was given exclusive access to follow immigration officers as they raided businesses in London, arresting 2 EU citizens who officers said were in the UK without work visas.
We're on board with immigration officers in South East London as they prepare to raid several businesses suspected of employing illegal immigrants. Arriving at this skip hire firm, these officers have to move fast if they're to stop their suspects disappearing. Searching all the possible hiding places as they go. Among those they're looking for, at least 2 Albanians. Immigration enforcement officers believe one of the men has run off.
Yeah, have you got a picture of it?
The other is behind the wheel of this vehicle, but a quick check reveals he has a proper work visa. Elsewhere, the rest of the workforce have gathered in this porta cabin as immigration officers check their status.
We're going to take you into this room and just speak to you in here, yeah?
After speaking to this Romanian, he was placed under arrest on suspicion of working in the UK without a proper visa. The senior immigration enforcement officer here told us they've now been issued with new guidance, allowing for the arrest of EU nationals living and working here illegally. Conservative MP Lee Anderson, who's on the Commons Home Affairs Select Committee, welcomed this apparent change in policy.
Well, it's welcome news, because if EU citizens are here and they are working and they should not be working, then quite frankly they're breaking the law. And this problem is much bigger than we think, I believe. I believe that this is happening up and down the country, in every town and village and city. There's a hidden population of people who are working that should not be working.
Following Brexit, EU nationals arriving in the UK must have the appropriate visas if they want to live and work here. And although border officials have detained some EU nationals at ports and airports they suspect of planning to work here illegally, those EU citizens already in the UK but working without permission have not been pursued by immigration enforcement until now. At a second nearby business, immigration officers have arrested another Romanian suspected of working illegally. It signals a tougher approach from Rishi Sunak's government after he promised to crack down on those abusing UK immigration laws. But with well over 1 million people suspected of living and working in the illegal economy, these immigration enforcement officers have never been busier. Mark White, GB News, South East London.
Well, let's get some reaction now from immigration lawyer Skylar McKeith. So, Skylar, this does signal, doesn't it, a tougher approach from Border Force?
It does signal a tougher approach, but there are systems and rules in place that are expected to be followed from an immigration... I'm sorry, it's my baby and he's being removed right now. But yeah, there are systems and rules in place that are expected to be followed from an immigration standpoint. And EU citizens coming to the UK to work following Brexit must now obtain work visas. And those resident in the UK before Brexit went into effect needed to apply to the EU settlement scheme to obtain pre-settled or settled status to continue being able to live and work in the UK. And coming out of lockdown, the people who did not legalise their status are desperate. And the immigration rules need to possibly be expanded to make it easier for people to obtain work permissions. And there is also a labour shortage in the UK, and some businesses may be in desperate need of workers, and they may not be able to afford all the fees associated with obtaining the work visas. In addition, not all jobs are eligible for visas. So this is also why we're running into this issue where there is illegal work in jobs in sectors and in industries that are not necessarily eligible for many work visas. And really the crackdown should be more focused on illegal crossing of the channel and the illegal immigration that way, rather than on the illegal working. Obviously, that is against the immigration rules, and that's why it would be much better to expand the immigration rules to allow for more work permissions.
It sounds like your baby was deported, Skylar.
He was deported, yes. He was crying illegally.
Poor little thing. Now, in all of this, there's a very strong argument to say, well, look, the law is that you've got to have settled status, you've got to have a work visa, and there's been a substantial grace period. So if you haven't got one, then really you should go, shouldn't you?
There are a lot of people that did not even realise they needed to apply to the EU settlement scheme. Some people put it off for various reasons. They didn't quite understand. They also didn't quite understand that it's a two-stage process for some people. So people that have been living in the UK for 5 years or more would have been eligible for settled status, which is permanent residency. But those living in the UK for under 5 years were eligible for pre-settled status. So that's a temporary status. And so a lot of the people on pre-settled status did not actually realise that they need to actually apply for settled status to regularise their stay and to become permanent residents. But as I said, there are a lot of people as well who did not know they even needed to apply to the EU settlement scheme in the first place. There was a grace period, quite a generous one, but a lot of people did not even realize. There are also employers that don't even know that they have employed illegal workers. Now, the UK employers do have the responsibility of preventing illegal working as well. And so they're actually required to conduct regular right to work checks to ensure that the individual they are employing has the right to work. And so employers that do breach these rules may be both civil and criminally prosecuted. So that they are responsible for checking.
OK, look, Skylar, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Your thoughts on that, please. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Now, the results of the latest GB News People's Poll are out, and once again, they reveal a valuable insight into the state of the nation.
Now, following the government's blocking of Scotland's gender reform bill, it's no surprise then that we're going to start there.
Yes, we can reveal that 22% of you strongly support the government's blocking of the controversial legislation, compared to 18% who said they were strongly opposed to it.
But when you look at those figures overall, it's pretty even Stevens, really.
Yeah.
Despite those mixed views, a vast majority of people asked said they think 16 years is too young to change your gender. And it's not just about changing your gender, it's without a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria and what have you. 41% completely agreed to only 8% who said that 16 was not too young.
Well, joining us now to unpack it all is Matt Goodwin, a professor of politics at Kent University. Good morning to you, Matt. So let's start with the gender bill up in Scotland, because mixed views in this poll from the public.
Well, there are, but once again, we find that one of the core planks of this bill, reducing the age at which somebody can legally change their gender, is really not actually popular at all. We only find that about 20% of the country support one of the key things this piece of legislation is going to do. That's consistent, by the way, Ellie, with other polling that we've had over the last few weeks, which again has shown that really only about 1 in 5 voters support what is happening in Scotland. And when you then say to people, look, the government is using the UK-wide equalities legislation to block this bill in Scotland, saying it's going to violate that UK-wide legislation, more people support the government doing that than oppose it. So, you know, we're hearing all this stuff online and elsewhere about how it's the opponents of this bill stoking the so-called culture wars. But actually, if you look at the polling, it's really the government in Scotland that is pushing a piece of legislation that is actually very, very unpopular.
To this as a story. Moving on to one of the other key questions, though, which I get is fascinating for a whole host of reasons. Stricter anti-strike laws, not popular.
Well, this is exactly right. I mean, Rishi Sunak and his government have been trying to really bring forward measures that would make it harder for people to strike, given all the sort of chaos and turmoil that we're seeing now with schools being added to that. But, you know, toughening up strike laws is not a vote winner. If you ask people to what extent do they support those measures, do they agree, only a minority do. About 35% support the idea of anti-strike laws in Britain. And this is a key point to me. The bottom line about these strikes, however disruptive they've been, is that they've consistently attracted more support in the public than many listeners and viewers may actually think. And this is one of the dilemmas for Sunak, that on the one hand, we desperately need Britain to get back to working, to being active, to being dynamic. But at the same time, we've got all of these strikes, industrial disputes and so forth. But people are not really giving us much of an appetite at all for tougher laws to clamp down on these strikes.
And the support for Conservatives remains at a historic low of 21%, according to this poll. Not a pleasant sight for the Tories.
They're still in wipeout territory. I mean, this is pretty gloomy for number 10. We're now almost coming up to the end of month 1 of 2023. I'm hearing rumours that the next election is going to most likely be in the spring of 2024. That gives Rishi Sunak little more than a year. But if you look at where the national vote shares are today, and you apply this into a model of the seats at the House of Commons, you're looking at a pretty big Labour majority. Sunak is only currently holding about 60% of the people who voted for Boris Johnson in 2019. Many of those people fed up with the state of the country, fed up with immigration, fed up with what they see as a Conservative government that's not really delivering Conservative policies. A large number of those are saying they're not going to vote at all. And that's a big problem for Sunak.
Can I just very briefly, what about the Reform UK vote there? It was at 8%. It's only 1 percentage point behind the Liberal Democrats. Now, would that 8% hold up actually in a general election? Because people know it's bad news. If they're to the right, then that actually is bad news for the Tories, and they're more likely to get a Labour government should they vote for something like Reform.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice spot. Reform have been doing better, actually, over the last few months. They've been averaging around that 8-9% mark. Most of their vote is coming from the Conservatives. Not all of their vote is coming from the Conservatives. And if you speak to people like Richard Tice, the leader, or people around that party, what they're saying is essentially they now feel they've got momentum, that they've achieved a lot more in a short space of time than the UK Independence Party did over 20 years. And they're now beginning to think about what seats they're going to target at the next election. Will they poll 8, 9, 10% in the general election where people are worried about wasting their vote? Maybe not. But will they still poll enough support to cause Rishi Sunak yet another headache he doesn't need? I'd bet my house on it. Unless this Conservative government reconnects with the people who actually voted for it in 2019, then believe me, it's going to be game over for Rishi Sunak and the government at the next election.
But still, with 18 months to go, it could be a long time in politics, couldn't it? Matt Goodwin, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Now, an assessment of England's Fire and Rescue Service will be published today, looking at the overall performance of the emergency provision during last year.
Well, this morning, the Inspectorate released the third and final wave of inspection reports from 16 fire services.
Now, it includes a performance review of the Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service, from where our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis joins us now. And what are these reports saying, Will?
Yes, well, His Majesty's Inspectorate, led by Andy Cook, spends time at all of England's 44 fire and rescue services, and what it expects from that time is that it can grade each individual fire and rescue service as good. That's the standard that the Inspectorate expects on behalf of the public. So, for example, Leicestershire, where I am today, in this latest wave, was inspected and graded as good, but requiring improvement in how the service prevents fire and uses resources. Callum Faint, the Chief Fire and Rescue Officer here at Leicestershire, said that the service had made massive steps forward, but that there are further improvements to be made. Now, of this set of inspections, there are 16. 2 of them received inadequate gradings. Those were North Yorkshire and Cumbria Fire Service. Inadequate is the lowest grading. It was both services were graded as inadequate for efficiently keeping people safe from fire and other risks. That's the lowest standard. And now both will be put into special measures and will receive further visits from the Inspectorate over the coming months. Both fire and rescue services have acknowledged the findings in the inspection. Now, all of these smaller inspections come together to make the State of Fire and Rescue Service reports that we are going to see later, around about mid-morning. And what we can expect from that Inspectorate report is that it's certainly going to highlight things like the cost of living, the recovery of the pandemic, and it will certainly look at the effect of future strikes, because right now the Fire Brigades Union is balloting its members, and we'll know whether firefighters will go on strike before the end of January.
OK, Will, thanks very much.
Now, retail sales figures have been revealed this morning, showing that the UK had a lower than expected Christmas period spending, as retail sales volumes fell by 1%.
Well, sales figures in December remained at 1.7% below pre-coronavirus levels, as the Office for National Statistics showed sales volumes fell by 3% between 2021 and 2022. All these numbers get very confusing, but the figures are down, basically.
And with us this morning is author and founder of The Retail Champion, Claire Bailey. Good morning to you, Claire. These figures just broken in the last few minutes. Let's start with this top one here. Retail sales volumes estimated to have fallen by 1% in December. December obviously being the month for most people's Christmas shopping. Is this the sign that the cost of living crisis is beginning to bite and impact on our spending?
It's partly a consequence of the cost of living, absolutely. But the fact that the sales figures in the previous month, for instance, were not as down as we might have expected, we have seen that people pulled forward some of their Christmas spending where they possibly could. So what does that mean? It means that Black Friday took away from December, but also the supermarkets running large-scale promotions on more of the non-perishable food items, encouraging people to spread their spending across 2 paychecks instead of just one. So typically, November is modest and December really peaks. However, what we have seen is that sales value in a lot of retailers was quite a long way up. So sales volume is the amount of stuff, and high value and low volume is a consequence of the inflation. So it is evidence that people are trying to rein in their spending. But in fact, the actual spending was higher. It's just that people got less for their money.
Yeah, which is, as Liam Halligan says, it's when you look under the bonnet of these figures that you see what it really means, which is something you could say about online sales. Proportion of online sales, we're being told, fell to 25.4 from 25.9 in November. But there is some evidence to say, well, perhaps that's been driven by the Royal Mail strike. So it's not that people haven't been spending it. They've been spending it on the high street instead of online.
In part, but total spending's down. What actually the fact about the online is that in January of 2020, online as a proportion of all retail was only 18.6%. And then by April, it shot up to over 30% because we went into lockdown. What we're seeing now is online going back more to where you might expect it to be. However, the result of the pandemic is people changed their shopping behaviours and became more dependent online. So 25% is still actually better than it has been for quite a number of years before. And I would suggest that, yes, people have gone back to the high street. Yes, uncertainty around delivery because of all the strikes was a contributing factor. But nonetheless, it has dropped back in the last 3 years.
We haven't had that bounce back, have we, from the pandemic that so many people suggested we might. Sales volumes down 1.7% below their pre-coronavirus levels.
Yeah, I think that's the consequence, though, of the inflationary pressures, the cost of living and people's general state of confidence. So pre-pandemic, things weren't glorious, but they were a whole lot better than they are now. And we also saw a number of post-pandemic actions where people spent less in stores because they were finally allowed to go out to hospitality and leisure. So they were spending more in restaurants and bars. That's flipped around again this year, where people have said to themselves, I'd rather spend in the supermarkets, buy some nice food and drinks and have a party at home or in the office, rather than spend on hospitality. So whereas last year hospitality did quite well, this year they've done quite badly. But the sort of trend is that people are being cautious where they spend and are making choices based on the consequence of either coming out of lockdown or now fear for what happens next. And I actually think these figures aren't too bad. What does concern me is how the figures will fall in April when the next release comes out, because typically Christmas time is quite buoyant. People certainly did spend, and it seems that they spent more than expected, even though the volume of goods purchased dropped. In April, I'd see an anticipation of both spending dropping and volume dropping, which will hurt the retailers in the high street. And that's where I'd be much more nervous. These figures actually are kind of in line with what people expected, maybe even slightly better.
And Claire, just briefly, I was reading yesterday that luxury shopping is actually up at the moment. International visitors from all around the world coming to London as a result of a weaker pound.
Yeah, and that always happens. And there's always a segment of society, whether it be wealthy tourism or indeed people who I call them recession-proof, in that they're sitting on cash, they're not worrying about jobs, they have income from other sources. They will continue to spend. So luxury tend to not be too badly hit when there's this cost of living crisis, because the type of people that shop at that end are unaffected to a larger degree. Also, discount shopping's done very well too. We've seen a trend towards B&M away from some of the more mid-market retailers. But even within that, we've seen good profits and good performance coming out of the supermarkets, which suggests that they've really worked hard on their sustainability. And what we need is these supermarkets to actually make profit, because they feed the shareholders, a lot of whom are things like institutional pension funds. So ultimately, their profits feed people's incomes, and their sustainability, the number of stores, the employees, keeps people in jobs. So we should be grateful that some of these retailers are actually not doing too badly at all.
Yeah. Claire, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We like the idea of sitting on money.
Oh, it must be
Don't we?
nice, yeah.
Sadly, I'm just sitting on...
I'm on a rock-hard stool, unfortunately, but must be nice. Anyway.
Yeah, I was sitting on... Well, that's what it's interesting. I always find it interesting with luxury goods like that, because why do people buy luxury stuff like that anyway?
If I had the money, I
Cheap
would.
and cheerful.
Would you not? Oh, please, you would. You would.
You can always get cheap suits, these.
Well, it doesn't look like a cheap
suit. But they look
suit.
great. Tie £8 off an online retailer.
Look, this is his attempt to match with me. I said, I'm wearing green today. See if you can wear some green.
It's the closest I had, really.
It's fine.
She didn't tell me what
we're blending. We're blending.
You didn't tell me you were going for Apple.
It does.
I thought it was something a bit more dynamic than that. But anyway, if you're listening on the radio, you're not missing much.
I look like an apple. That's all you need to know. Right.
Don't set me off.
He's going to go have a coughing fit. We'll be back after this short break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
$7.29, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. What are you laughing at?
I don't know, you just
What are
make
you
me laugh.
laughing
You
at?
just make me laugh.
It's terrible.
Honestly.
I just said, of all the people to work with, she's a nightmare. She's a nightmare.
Keep you on your toes.
So bubbly first thing. You turn up and you're just like, give me a coffee.
Get me a coffee. Shush, shush.
And she's full of old beans.
Anyway. Well, I'll tell you who else is full of old
Oh,
beans.
always.
Here he is. You like that one, did you?
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Adrian
Yeah,
McGee.
wasn't bad. How are we?
Yeah,
There he
we're
is.
all right.
How are
we're
you?
all right.
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Can we talk about Spurs, please? Because, again, I found myself watching this last night and it was incredible. So they were 2-0 up at half-time and then it all changed.
Well, we have a floor manager here who said to me, I went to bed really excited last night. He's a Spurs fan, but he went to bed at half-time, expecting them to see the game out when he woke up.
Because you think you're done and dusted, yeah.
Exactly, but not at Manchester City. I mean, we saw on the last day of last season, they went 2 goals down to Aston Villa, hugely important game. It could have cost them the league title, but they turned it round in the second half. That's what champions do, and that's why. And let's just recap. Tottenham went 2-0 up, and then City came out the blocks at the start of the second half, scored 2 goals quickly, and scored two more. Erling Haaland scored once, and Riyad Mahrez, who I'd have been disappointed if I was him last season. Top scorer, they reached the Champions League semi-final, they reached the League Cup final, they won the Premier League, and then he gets ditched because they buy Erling Haaland. He waits patiently to come back into the side, and he starts knocking him in again. He won them the game last night, and this is why I don't think the title race is over, because you look at it now, they've reduced the lead now between themselves and Arsenal to 5 points. Okay, they've played a game extra, so that matters. But by the time they play Wolves on Saturday, they could be within 2 points of Arsenal. We played Manchester United on Saturday at Sunday at 4:30, and that's going to be a big test of their mettle. We'll see what Arsenal are made of, certainly.
Yeah.
Before you jump in with another one, because she's desperate to talk sport. I never get a
It's
look
because I never know what's going on, but I do understand this game.
Can we talk tennis?
Yeah,
and
of
Andy
course we
Murray,
can.
because
Yes.
I mean, Andy Murray's done really well. Is kicked off at the authorities down under, hasn't he? Because of the timing of the matches.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I mean, can you imagine playing a World Cup game or imagine the Olympics or anything like that still ongoing at 4:05 in the morning? That's when they finish. Now, if you look at his schedule, notwithstanding the fact that he's 35 years old, he's had multiple knee injuries over the last 7 years. He hasn't really competed at the top level of tennis, as in winning majors, since 2016. And then he's got a metal plate in his hip as well. They finished yesterday after a 5.5-hour session with, he has to do media afterwards. He has to get the proper recovery in. He probably didn't go to bed until about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. There's then a 40-hour turnaround before he faces Bautista Agut on Saturday, or tomorrow morning at 8 in the morning. Now, it doesn't happen in other sports. Martin Navratilova has been very critical. John McEnroe was critical. Barry Cowan was on radio yesterday, very critical of the fact that they think it was quite cynical that the Australian Open, particularly because of the time zone, were happy to let it go that far because it plays into, it falls in quite comfortable broadcasting zones for the rest of the world. Now, that doesn't take into account the health of the players. Yes, not all matches go on 5.5 hours, but...
Oh, no, but even so, they can't start it till sort of 11 o'clock
No, that's right. I mean, maybe there's an argument for reducing it if it starts after a certain time. I'm not clear what the solution is on this, but let's take nothing away from Andy Murray. Andy Murray he now set a record. He became, I think he's produced more comebacks from 2 sets down to win at the top level than any other player. Roger Federer was on 10, and Murray took that to 11 yesterday. That's an outstanding performance, and he keeps going and keeps going. He's earned so much money over the years. He's got 4 kids at home. He doesn't need to be travelling to Australia at this time of the year to compete in tournaments. I don't think he'll go much further. That's just because of this match. He's played for 2 5-setters already. And then he goes up against Bautista Agut, who's fresh, on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. It's going to be very tough for him. Also, Djokovic is going very well, and a few other players as well.
Cam Norrie, can we have a word?
Yeah, Cam Norrie, yeah, definitely. I mean, he's 1 set all at the moment. I think he's just broken in the 3rd set. Yeah, brilliant breakthrough year for him last year at the age of, 26. We are late starters these days, aren't we, sometimes? But nonetheless, I think he's a real hope to get to at least the quarters or semis, possibly even further.
We've got about 60 seconds left. Can we talk Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith? They've apologised because there were some really ugly scenes, actually.
Yeah, there were.
There at the
Yeah, it was quite unedifying, really. I mean, I'm not going to repeat what was said, but listen, these press conferences, as we know, it's trash talk all the way. It's designed to try and sell the fight. This is a pay-per-view event on Sky. They started trading insults on the stage, but in terms of the actual fight itself, I mean, both boxers have apologised afterwards, but it really did go below the belt at one stage, you know. So, but in terms of the actual fight, the winner. Well, it's a chance for Eubank to get back on course. I mean, it wasn't his fault, but 2-3 months ago, it was Conor Benn's failure of a drugs test that caused that fight to be postponed. And in Manchester, they're going to have a dust-up tomorrow against Liam Smith. Liam Smith's won his last 2 fights. The prize could be a title shot at Triple G, Gennady Golovkin. And he's a top fighter. He's kind of past his peak, I would have thought, but I'd fancy him to be either of these two. But yeah, it should be a decent fight tomorrow night.
Why is he called Triple G if there's only 2 Gs in his name?
I don't know why it was Triple G. I should know this. I've met him.
That's something you would know.
Yeah, I know. I'll look it up later on. But I think his middle name might begin with G.
Oh, well, that
possibly.
Would be it.
Yeah, possibly. But I don't know for certain.
Oh, we're just being told Cam Norrie just won the 3rd set.
Oh, he's won the 3rd set. Fantastic. In that means he's probably got a reasonable chance of. If he wins the 4th, he's got a reasonable chance of tying up that game within 2 hours and 45, which is about.
He's not going to do an Andy Murray.
Roughly half of what Andy Murray had to contend with yesterday.
Wow.
All right.
Are you back with us?
Not later, no. I'm over the weekend, though. We've got a great weekend of sport.
Of course, it's Friday, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
I'll lose track of the days. OK, Aidan, thank you very much indeed. Just a quick word on the police, because all this hoo-ha over the police at the moment. Clive says, hi, Clive, please don't forget all the good police who are out there putting their lives on the line to keep us safe day in, day out. I couldn't agree more strongly, Clive. This is a problem. These excellent police officers, 99.9% of all police officers get overlooked when there's some scandal like this, and they're good and hard-working and putting their personal safety on the line for our benefit. And we absolutely must not forget them, so well said.
Yeah, do keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:39, a very good morning to you. It's Friday, as I keep being told by people. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. I keep thinking it's Saturday for some reason.
You're still not over Christmas, are you? You're still in that weird...
And then I worked Monday to Thursday for 2 weeks.
That threw you off kilter, didn't it?
Very confusing.
Was that nice to be in the world of the living?
It was nice. Yeah. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much, but I did spend the first few days, because I was on at noon, and I kept saying good morning to everybody in the interviews.
It's complicated, yeah.
Muscle memory.
There it is. But you're back on Breakfast now, where you belong.
Where I belong.
There you belong at the weekend. It's good to have you. I'm happy to be here with you as well.
Thank you very much.
Right, shall we lead you through the papers now? What's going on today? And the Times leads with speculation that Jeremy Hunt wants to extend the 5p fuel duty cut for another year.
The Guardian says Conservative constituencies are getting more cash from the Levelling Up Fund than Labour voting counterparts.
The Mail appeals to the government to cut taxes following claims that the economy has turned a corner.
And the Eye has reports the EU is keen to see Keir Starmer become Prime Minister.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is Deputy Editor of Spite, Fraser Myers, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Good morning to you both. Fraser, let's start with you, shall we? Really interesting story in the Eye this morning that the EU wants Starmer to become British PM, and Starmer's planning to rebuild ties with Brussels. Tell us a bit more about this.
Well, so if you cast your mind back a few weeks ago, Keir Starmer was talking about taking back control. He kind of used this famous Brexiteer slogan when he was in East London setting out his New Year vision. And then about a week later, he started talking about forming closer ties to the EU. And now he's in Davos, of all places, calling for closer ties to the EU. And I think he's been given an endorsement that no British leader should want, which is the preferred candidate of the European Union. You know, the very people that we voted to get rid of, to stop interfering in our politics, are saying Starmer is our man. I mean, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise.
But there are polls out, and I saw them a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't looked at them in detail, I must confess. However, they were implying that there are a lot of people who voted for Brexit who are now sort of thinking that they shouldn't have done. That was the implication from the poll. I don't know how true it is.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't blame people looking at, say, the current government and thinking, well, what are they doing with Brexit? What was the point of all that then? We did also have, you know, the pandemic got in the way. All of these kind of other global crises have been happening around the time of Brexit. And there's been I think quite a fairly concerted effort on the part of the media. I mean, we were sort of talking about this in the last round, to say that whether it's inflation or, you know, the recession or energy prices are some kind of related to Brexit in some way, or labour shortages are often blamed on Brexit and the changes to immigration, even though that's also a kind of global problem. Whereas the Brexiteers, I feel, have had less to shout about. You know, there was a good... the vaccines were a good early Brexit victory, but in terms of concrete things, I suppose there's less to point to. Yeah. I mean, for me, the main thing is about democracy. But...
The last thing we need to do is start... We've just had all the turmoil of Brexit. We don't want to start edging back in the other direction just yet, do we?
Well, exactly. I think that so whatever if people are feeling cold about Brexit, there certainly isn't a enthusiasm to rejoin the EU.
And even Starmer's saying that, isn't he?
Even Starmer's saying that, and you know, but the worry, I suppose, is that we get closer to, you know, we do want to have a close trading relationship with the EU, of course. You know, we have a free trade deal with them, and that's a good thing. But, you know, once we start accepting more EU rules, getting up, cozying up to them, then that starts to become a problem, and that's maybe where Keir Starmer could be taking us.
Liz, let's have a look at your story now. Smog and pollution are responsible for astronomical changes in the Telegraph, something a bit different for us.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say that if people in this country were given more information about what's going on in Europe, they wouldn't think it was the land of milk and honey that was attractive. Yesterday in France, 1 million people took to the streets to protest against the government for wanting to revise their pension rules and age of retirement. And, you know, we talked earlier about the inflation figures across Europe. And Italy, terrible problems with boat people coming across from North Africa. So when people are told about these things, or, you know, the information's put in front of them, they're genuinely shocked that they didn't know that and glad to have that information out. That's just finished my part on that. Right, light pollution. It's really... this article is saying that because of more and more building, more and more electric lights everywhere, it's going to get harder and harder to see the twinkling stars in the night sky. And at this rate, a child born in a location where 250 stars are visible now will only be able to see about 100 by the time they turn 18. Well, you might think, so what? But I know from where I live, I look over on a hill looking over a valley towards Milton Keynes. And when I first moved there 30 years ago, the sky was completely dark at night. And you could see all the stars. And now there's this glowing haze where Milton Keynes has expanded and expanded and expanded right to the, you know, the other side of the valley. And I don't like it. You know, it's, well, you know, people do have to have somewhere to live, but it is a shame, and it is really nice to go somewhere like North Wales, where I was last week, or if you went up home to Cumbria, and you really know that it's really nice when it's properly dark at
It does
night.
feel like a rarity now, doesn't it?
Oh, the proper dark sky locations which are protected, there's not that many really now. But it's the nature of it. I mean, I'm with you. I love all of that.
Yeah.
However, you know, we've got to build more homes. There's got to be, I mean, quite how we can do it in a way that protects from light pollution, I don't know. But
I think it's fascinating when you see at the start of some news broadcasts, they have a satellite image of Europe.
I don't know what news broadcast you're watching.
I think
you need to stop it immediately.
I think it's ITV. Well, stop me watching it.
Yeah.
And it's the map that's fascinating because you can see, you know that the Netherlands is really densely populated, you know, Belgium and Holland. You can see it. You know where the big areas of... France is quite dark, but you can see the Paris area and you can see the Côte d'Azur, Nice, Cannes, that area. And then in Britain, you can see a big diagonal line from London following the M6 and the M1 corridors and, you know, into the northwest. And I just find it fascinating.
Yeah.
You can also see which countries were formerly communist because they have different coloured lights from the sky. So you can even see East and West Germany, you know, from the sky, just because of the different coloured lights.
Orange and white.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, how interesting.
Oh, and if your star sign is Cancer, you won't be able to see Cancer in the near future. It'll just be too faint.
Wow. Can we have a look at the Times, Fraser? The 10 hardest words.
The 10... So I'm going to read...
Donald Trump, though. He was very good with words. He knew a lot of words.
So I'm going to read you a sentence that contains all of the 10 hardest words to pronounce.
Oh, go on.
You can see how I do. So Aoife and Siobhan both had Omicron when they went to Kyiv, but it didn't stop their busy schedule. They had to meet Niamh and Saoirse, eat a meal of gyros and acai, and attend a seminar about the Nguyen dynasty.
Oh, right.
There you go.
You did quite well there.
Yeah, you think you did quite well. They're not that bad. I mean, things like Siobhan.
Siobhan is pretty
hard,
easy, but people struggle with Aoife and Niamh.
Yeah, so basically Irish girls' names.
Irish girls' names.
Yeah.
Niamh is... No, Niamh... I think most people know Niamh, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what about us... Now, this one, what's that one?
Saoirse.
Saoirse, yeah.
Because I used
Some
to
people say Saoirse.
Or Saoirse.
I used to work with someone with that name, and it was always a nightmare when their name popped up and also cue.
But now there's a famous actress, you know, Saoirse Ronan. So,
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
We'll have to ask Louise outside. We've got an Irish producer here who can help us with that.
And the schedule one is interesting because some people pronounce it schedule, but that's an Americanism.
Yeah,
So the British way to pronounce it is schedule.
See, I never know, because does that mean we're meant to say shul instead of school?
No. It's like lieutenant and lieutenant.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but that's obviously lieutenant is correct.
Yeah.
On that one, there's no...
But Aidan had that right, actually. I heard him say schedule when he was talking about the footballing. Yeah, so Aidan's got that right.
See, I'd probably get that one wrong, I should think.
Don't let's get started on Shrewsbury for all our listeners in the Shropshire area.
Oh, no, what is the...
Well, I once went to address a conference there and I can't remember which way I said it, but it split the room. Some people said, oh, how dare you come here and not know how to pronounce it, and other people said, no, we live here and we pronounce it like you, so...
Yeah, but it's like scone.
Scone.
Yeah, that's obviously scone.
I still don't know. Well, I say scone.
I say scones.
Do you? Oh, maybe we're all unanimous.
Scone, I say scone.
Oh, there you go.
It is, then.
Yeah.
Scone or scone? Let us know at home.
Stop messing
We
about.
seem quite unanimous here. So, is this a study, a survey? Of...
It's one of the a gambling company has put together a list. It's basically what people have Googled. People have Googled how to pronounce Aoife, and these are the 10 most Googled, therefore difficult words.
Things like Kiev, I still look at it and think Kiev.
Yeah.
So, I
had to retrain myself with that one.
I think some people do that quite ostentatiously. I remember early on in the war, Nick Robinson on BBC saying Kiev and, really hamming it up. And the Ukrainians he was talking to were saying Kiev. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we do get some Ukrainians saying Kiev, I know.
Yeah.
The other one, of course, is quinoa.
Oh yeah, I didn't. Do you remember when I didn't know how to pronounce it?
No, well, the number I know. My sister-in-law went to up north, went to the supermarket and said, have you got any quinoa? This was years ago. And you mean quinoa?
I said to you, I've never. Once driving home in the car, I said to you, I've never had quinoa. You went, you what, love? I said quinoa. You said it's quinoa.
Quinoa.
Oh.
But you wouldn't know unless you heard it, right? So somebody once told me if you're pronouncing things wrong, it's because you've read it rather than said it, and that's no bad thing.
I get laughed at over bourbon biscuits.
Oh, bourbon, I say.
Bourbon biscuits.
French, it would be bourbon.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
It's my best
bourbon,
French.
I always say. So
What do you say? It bourbon.
Bourbon.
Bourbon. You're making that more difficult to say. Bourbon.
Bourbon.
You have to push your lips out in a pouty French way.
It sounds very French, very fancy.
Very kissable lips, apparently.
Oh.
Just throwing it out.
Stephen, it's very early.
Talk about self-promotion.
No, not self-promotion. No one's allowed to go. Thank you very much. I'm a
Married
married man.
man.
Anyway, right, that's it from you two for now. We've
That was
wasted our
fun.
time on bourbon biscuits.
Bourbon.
Easy for me to say. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Thank you very much.
See you next time.
Thank you. Right, let's bring you up to date with other stories that are going on today. And Lancashire police are reportedly looking into the video of Rishi Sunak not wearing a seatbelt whilst in a moving car. The Prime Minister was filming a social media clip on his way to yesterday's levelling up announcement in the Northwest. He's already apologised, with his spokesman saying he made an error of judgment.
The latest deadline to restore Northern Ireland's power sharing at Stormont has passed without agreement. The UK government must now call another election within 12 weeks for the Assembly, not over here. But the Northern Ireland Secretary could opt to delay the election in the hope the government and EU can strike a deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Western allies from around 50 nations are meeting later today to discuss more military support for Ukraine. Last weekend, the UK became the first nation to dispatch tanks to the country. Kyiv is now seeking another 300 tanks to tackle a potential Russian counter-offensive, with Germany facing pressure to authorise the use of its Leopard 2 battle tanks.
And today, believe it or not, is Penguin Awareness Day. So go and buy a biscuit. Scientists have announced that the discovery of a new emperor penguin colony in Antarctica. Scientists have used mapping technology to find the group, and they spotted all this from space via satellite.
I love penguins. I think they might be my favourite animal.
Really?
Yeah. What's yours?
Cats, obviously.
Oh, obviously.
Come on.
Anyway, we're being told to go to Sally because we're talking about price of flights now. If you haven't noticed, because I certainly have looking at the flights, they're up 44% in the last year. That's according to new figures from the Office of National Statistics.
Yes, it's all very worrying. Let's talk to travel expert Sally Gethin, who is here. Good morning. What's going on?
Well, this has been building up for a long time. Airlines knew they would have to pass on their costs to customers because of the cost of aviation fuel, which is still based on oil, of course. We all know the story behind that. I mean, aviation fuel accounts for airlines at least 30% of their operating cost, and that has been soaring. But also, they face a lot of other problems. There's a shortage of aircraft since the pandemic, spare parts and engines, and also a skills shortage. You know, if you remember the summertime, there were all these problems, not enough ground handling staff, not enough crews in many cases. So it's been building up, and now, customers are going to have to take the hit to their pockets.
Sally, can you help us? How do we bag a bargain? What do we do to get some cheap flights?
So you have to roll up your shirt sleeves and do the hard work, basically, and get out there and think what your destinations. So Eastern Europe, avoiding Ukraine, obviously, is a good, safe bet. So Bulgaria and Romania, for example, even Poland and Croatia, countries like that are investing heavily in their tourism, and they're beautiful parts of the world as well to go to. But also the most popular destinations at the moment are still the Med. So Greece and Turkey, all those destinations are still very, very popular, and the Canaries. And also the USA, people are keen to get back to the USA. The good news is there's a lot of competition on the transatlantic routes, which should compensate for some of the higher airfares. So there's, you know, a lot more seats to be had.
What about buying in advance? Like substantially, 6 months in advance.
Yeah, so there's two ways of approaching this. There's pros and cons either way. So obviously, if your destination is really in high demand, it's a good idea to book early to ensure, if you've got a family and you want to make sure you've got those places and those seats to book early. But sometimes, yes, those costs do reduce in the run-up. So also, if it's a destination that's in less demand, it might be a good idea to wait a little bit longer because you might bag a bargain at the last minute.
That's what I'm hoping for.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? The sort of the last minute deals or early bird deals. It's very hard to know which is the best one.
No, absolutely. And you always have to look for all the hidden costs when you're making your booking, and also make sure it's ATOL protected, which if the firm were to go under, let's hope that never happens, but sometimes it has happened, you have that protection, your travel insurance, and look for hidden costs all the way through, all the T's and C's when you're signing up for your holiday.
Yeah, quite right too. Sally, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. Don't go anywhere. We've got all the top stories heading your way in just a few minutes. This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
EU citizens living in the UK without visas will now face the real threat of deportation.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Friday, the 20th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. Here are your top stories this morning.
Well, GB News can exclusively reveal immigration enforcement officers are going to start cracking down on EU citizens who live and work in the UK without the right paperwork. What's that going to mean for our post-Brexit relationship with the rest of Europe?
We also had the results of our latest People's Poll as we ask, do you agree with how the government has dealt with Scotland's gender recognition bill?
Retail figures for December have been released in the last hour, a surprise fall over the festive period, so should we be worried about the impact on the economy?
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So we begin with the news that we can reveal EU citizens living and working in the UK without a valid visa will face the prospect of arrest and deportation.
Well, immigration enforcement officers have been issued with the new guidance, allowing for the detention and removal of those EU nationals who are working here illegally.
Well, our Home and Security Editor Mark White was given exclusive access to follow immigration officers as they raided businesses in London, arresting 2 EU citizens who officers said were in the UK without work visas.
We're on board with immigration officers in South East London as they prepare to raid several businesses suspected of employing illegal immigrants. Arriving at this skip hire firm, these officers have to move fast if they're to stop their suspects disappearing. Searching all the possible hiding places as they go. Among those they're looking for, at least 2 Albanians. Immigration enforcement officers believe one of the men has run off.
Yeah, have you got a picture of it?
The other is behind the wheel of this vehicle, but a quick check reveals he has a proper work visa. Elsewhere, the rest of the workforce have gathered in this porta-cabin as immigration officers check their status.
We're going to take you into this room and just speak to you in here, yeah?
After speaking to this Romanian, he was placed under arrest on suspicion of working in the UK without a proper visa. The senior immigration enforcement officer here told us they've now been issued with new guidance, allowing for the arrest of EU nationals living and working here illegally. Conservative MP Lee Anderson, who's on the Commons Home Affairs Select Committee, welcomed this apparent change in policy.
Well, it's welcome news, because if EU citizens are here and they are working and they should not be working, then quite frankly they're breaking the law. And this problem is much bigger than we think, I believe. I believe that this is happening up and down the country, in every town and village and city. There's a hidden population of people who are working that should not be working.
Following Brexit, EU nationals arriving in the UK must have the appropriate visas if they want to live and work here. And although border officials have detained some EU nationals at ports and airports they suspect of planning to work here illegally, those EU citizens already in the UK but working without permission have not been pursued by immigration enforcement until now. At a second nearby business, immigration officers have arrested another Romanian suspected of working illegally. It signals a tougher approach from Rishi Sunak's government after he promised to crack down on those abusing UK immigration laws. But with well over 1 million people suspected of living and working in the illegal economy, these immigration enforcement officers have never been busier. Mark White, GB News, South East London.
OK, let's get some reaction from human rights lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal, who's here. Good to see you this morning. Look, is this a sensible move? I mean, a lot of people who are emailing in are saying, Frank says this isn't only about EU citizens. The law is anyone working without a visa is working illegally. The employer's also guilty for not checking their status. I mean, it seems pretty cut and dried.
Yeah, it is pretty cut and dry. This law's been in for ages. If some company employs someone who hasn't got the right paperwork to be employed, i.e. not the correct visas, then they get fined £20,000. It was initially £10,000. Now, whether those fines are enforced or not, that's another sort of issue. And the fact that it's British businesses who'll have to pay that fine, ultimately, and they're the ones being hurt. However, there's a suspected 1.5 million people living in this country illegally. They can't claim benefits because they don't have national insurance numbers. So they are working in the economy somewhere and doing unskilled, mainly unskilled jobs, as we see at car washes or construction sites or even restaurants. And
how much is ignorance a defence? Because a lot of people say, well, we didn't know anything about this. We didn't know that we had to, our status was changing or we had to have work visas.
Unfortunately, it's not a defence at all, because there's a system on the internet which anyone can access called Right to Work. Every employer has a right to access that, can input the details of the migrant they want to employ, and it will come up there. A migrant will also have something called a share code. An EU migrant will be issued a share code. They're supposed to supply that to the employer, a copy of their passport, a copy of the paperwork, and an employer must have that on file. If not, they're in breach and they risk that £20,000 fine per migrant. So if someone gets caught with 10 employees, it's a 200 grand fine.
Is the focus on the right place here, though? EU nationals not having settled status who are working here illegally when we have a Channel crisis, 46,000 crossing in 2022. I mean, shouldn't the focus be there? Seems a lot more obvious to many people, especially many viewers getting in touch today. Or is this just an easier thing to tackle?
I think your viewers are very astute, and they know that catching two people perhaps working near skips is not the problem. The problem is people coming over, the 44,000 coming over. And I note that immigration won't invite you to take your cameras there and show what they're doing while these 44,000 are being, as opposed to saying, oh, we're going around in vans and trying to catch people. Catching people isn't new. It's been happening for the last 20, 30 years. It's about sending people back and creating a deterrent. Now, pre-2012, we were sending back 35,000 people a year. That's dropped to hundreds. Now, when you're not sending people back, it's not sending a signal as a deterrent. There's no point catching these two people. They might be out in 3 hours later. They might be out by tonight or tomorrow.
But is part of the problem with this, is it the system and the way the system is running then, if we were sending 35,000 back, or is it the lawyers, I hate to say it, but is it the lawyers that are causing problems? You can't seem to try to deport anyone now without the lawyers jumping in, and before you know it, it's up at the High Court, the Supreme Court and everywhere else.
Lawyers have been around for a long time. When they were sending 33,000 and 35,000 back, there were lawyers then as well. So it's not the lawyers, as say, it's a broken system. Every year we have a Home Affairs Select Committee report, which tells us the Home Office is not fit for purpose. It's a broken system. What we're doing is we've got a machinery which is not working. And it's literally like saying a wall cannot load a bear. We'll just paper over it and tell everyone that's fine. We need to knock it down and make a new system, put infrastructure in place, make correct decisions, have staff properly trained, legally trained, as opposed to employing ex-supermarket staff and throwing them in at the deep end and saying, here you go, deal with a visa case. And we need to knock out decisions a lot quicker. It shouldn't take 2 years to decide an asylum claim. We shouldn't have a backlog. An asylum claim can be decided in half a day. At the moment, we're just an average caseworker is deciding 1 case a week. They should be doing at least 5 cases a week. So all of that combined has resulted in a big backlog and a system and a lack of deterrent. And it's a fact. It's never the lawyers, because the law is there to be enforced. A lawyer can't prevent someone getting a 20 grand fine if they haven't got the paperwork. There's no defence to it, like we said. Yeah. It is the fact that the system is so broken and that the people in charge, whether the will is not there or the competence isn't there, to deal with it. And instead of paying lip service, what they should be doing is telling the public, well, hold on, 44,000 are coming over. Next year, it's going to come down to 0. But we don't hear anything about that.
No. OK, Harjap, good to see you, as always. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. I'll just bring you a few views on that, because it really has got you talking this morning. Maria says the staff working to catch and remove these people would be better utilised to process and remove illegal migrants. This is a propaganda scheme by the government to look like they're doing something. I'm more interested in getting rid of those in hotels, costing us £10 million per day. And Fred's been in touch saying, I've been prosecuted for speeding illegally. I don't automatically try to wiggle out of it by blaming the law. The sooner we deal with cross-channel lawbreakers, the better. The law is the law. Suck it up. Well, do keep them coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, at 10 minutes past 8, the results of the latest GB News People's Poll are in, and following the government's blocking of Scotland's gender reform bill, it's no surprise that we're going to start there.
Yes, we can reveal that 22% of you strongly support the government's blocking of the controversial bill, compared to 18% who said they were strongly opposed to the government's decision.
Now, despite mixed views, a vast majority of people said they think 16 is too young. That's what the bill says. 16, you can change your gender at 16 without a medical diagnosis. They say it's too young. 41% completely agreed to only 8% who said they disagreed.
Well, joining us now to unpack this all is former Chief Secretary to the Treasury and friend of the programme, David Mellor.
Morning.
Like your shirt this morning, David.
Very exciting, isn't it?
It is,
I put it on just for you.
It's like a very smart deck chair. And I've been called an apple this morning by...
But I used to be a deck chair attendant when I was a student.
Really?
So I fell in love with deck chairs.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, you look
and
very
I
smart.
wear a deck chair.
You look very smart this morning. So let's have a look into this People's Poll, shall we? Because it's very interesting, the mixed views on the Scotland gender bill. Is that to do with the issues at the crux of this bill? You know, things like deciding your gender at 16 years old, because people seem to be quite in agreement with that. So are those mixed views to do with the way that Westminster has handled this, the fact that they have blocked?
Yes, I think a lot of people are quite confused about the whole thing, because don't forget, this has slightly come out of a clear blue sky. I mean, I've lived most of my life without this being an issue. I mean, I'm sure it was an issue, it just never reached my level of unconsciousness, and I think a lot of people will suddenly think, out of a clear blue sky has come this stuff, and obviously it's hard not to feel extremely engaged with the emotions of somebody who is totally convinced that they have been born into the wrong sex, and the desire to help them is, of course, considerable. The worry for me, and which would determine how I would vote in this poll, and I think has determined how a lot of of the people that we have polled would see this, is what on earth are you doing allowing people at 16 to make what could be an irrevocable decision, particularly if there's medication or surgery or anything like that, as a follow-up?
Without a medical diagnosis?
Well, but I think even with a medical diagnosis, look, I mean, you know, I'm way over the age of 16, but I might wake up one morning and feel one thing, and then I wake up the next morning and feel something completely different. A lot of us are like that. But I think the real problem is at the age of 16, it's very young to make a fundamental decision. I'm not sure I would have been up to doing that.
No. That doesn't mean that some people aren't, though. I mean, this is when I was looking at some arguments made by trans groups when all this Section 35 business came out, and you can understand they feel they're being discriminated against by this, even though the government came out and said, you know, we want to support trans people, we just don't think this is, you know, we can't bring this into UK law.
No, but I think it's right to be cautious, particularly when you're dealing with 16-year-olds. So I know people say, well, at 16 you can do this, you can do that, you can fight for your country, etc., you can die for your country. But I just think, if anything, it's one thing to have an opinion. It's quite another, though, for that opinion to then be backed up by things that are unchangeable.
No, well, if you've got a view on that, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Can we have a look at within all of these latest questions that we've been asking in the People's Poll? Of course, the one which you always have to do is support for the parties. State of the parties at the moment. 21% for the Tories, 45%, I think it is, for the Labour Party. We've said in the past, well, that's because people are feeling fed up with the government and not necessarily in support of Labour. Labour's been coming out with some firmer policy ideas of late.
But, well, I tell you, this reminds me so much of the build-up to the 1997 election, where those who can still remember 1997, I just about can, is the Tories lost more than half their seats. It was a catastrophe. Although, in fact, the period of government leading up to the 97 election had been quite successful in terms of the way the economy had performed and so on. But the public had had enough of the Tories, and they weren't going to change their mind. If the Archangel Gabriel had been installed as Prime Minister, it wasn't going to make any difference. And if I was one of Rishi Sunak's advisors, I would say, where's the Sunak effect? I mean, 21% is a disaster, and it's ever since I've been commenting on these polls, it hasn't changed.
No.
And, of course, there are people who say, well, it could change because, of course, the one big difference between 97 and now is that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were regarded as the dream team then, whereas I don't think anyone feels Keir Starmer is part of a dream team. I don't want to be unpleasant about him. He's a perfectly nice man, but there isn't the charisma there that shot Tony Blair right up into the into the stratosphere. But I personally think there is no hope for the Tories unless they can start influencing those numbers, and it could just be a long wait to be taken to the knacker's yard.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it could be 18 months to go, though, to the next election.
That's the point.
It could be a long time in politics, David Mellor. That's it for time, I'm afraid. But thank you so much.
Yeah. Stay there, David. I want to chat to you all hour.
Yeah.
About whatever's coming up. Now, the women's charity Refuge are staging a protest today. They're going to dump 1,071 rotten apples outside New Scotland Yard.
Well, it's understood that the apples are intended to represent the number of Met officers under investigation for allegations of domestic abuse.
Now, the demonstration is also in response to the now former officer, thankfully, David Carrick, pleading guilty to 24 counts of rape, which the charity described as utterly abhorrent.
Well, this morning we are joined by GB News' political reporter Catherine Forster, who is outside New Scotland Yard in central London. Well, good morning to you, Catherine, and what can we expect to see this morning?
So there's a lot of attention here, very striking protest behind me, as you can see, of 1,071 rotten apples. We heard, didn't we, after the horrific murder of Sever Everard by Wayne Couzens, a serving police officer, that there were the occasional bad apple in the Metropolitan Police. But now, with the fact that David Carrick, another serving officer who has now, of course, been sacked, was convicted of 49 crimes against women, including 24 rapes over a 20-year period against 12 women, that there are in fact many, many bad apples in the police, and action, sufficient action that you would have expected to have been taken, vetting that you would have expected to be in place, simply has been lacking. So Refuge is the biggest charity dealing with domestic abuse in the country. Police get a call once every 30 seconds from a woman about domestic abuse, and of course women need to be able to trust the police, don't they? So I'm delighted to be joined by Abigail Ampofo from Refuge. Abigail, thank you for talking to us this morning.
Good morning.
Can you just explain in your own words why you have decided to demonstrate the state of things in this way?
The events of this week, I think, have been shocking for everybody. This is not the first time, it's not the second time. There are 1,071 bad apples in the police, and action needs to be taken. So if this is the way that we have the Met to stand up, step up and be accountable, then this is fine.
What do you think needs to change now? What needs to happen now?
There needs to be accountability, there needs to be leadership, there needs to be understanding of violence against women and girls and misogyny. There needs to be direction, and women need to know that they are cared for.
And how much damage do you think has been done to women's trust in the police?
An insurmountable amount of damage. This is a really, really difficult message now for us and other agencies. Often the police should be your first line of defence. We will speak to women and we will all be speaking to them about contacting the emergency services. This is an incredibly difficult message to give to women now. We are still there and they can call us on the helpline, which is 0808 2000 247, but the police have done awful, awful damage.
Abigail Ampofo, thank you very much for talking to us. So, a lot of strong words this week, but now, of course, we need to see action. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has said that police forces up and down the country must be checking their databases, must be toughening up their vetting procedures. There's various inquiries going on, but what, of course, is needed now for women to trust the police again is swift and firm action.
Well, Catherine Forster, thank you very much for bringing us that report.
Now, let's talk about some people who are doing something amazing. And no surprise, it's a group of soldiers who are set to finish their 100-mile charity march today to Babs Mill Lake in Solihull.
Well, members from the Royal Hussars have been walking with their base in Tidworth to raise money for Birmingham Children's Hospital in memory of the 4 boys who lost their lives at the lake just over a month ago.
It's a remarkable feat. Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson is in Solihull for us this morning. I mean, it's really good to see these people putting back into the community and trying to get something positive out of all of this.
Yeah, that's right, Stephen, 100%. This was all the idea of Sergeant Brad Hawkins from the King's Royal Hussars, which of course we know is an armoured regiment. Their main weapon is called the Challenger 2 tank. They're based down in Wiltshire in Tidworth, and the Sergeant Brad Hawkins grew up in this area. This is why this has all come about, because this is where he grew up. This is his community. He's got so many friends and family here. He used to play around the lake. There was a boating club that used to be here. He used to be part of that. So he felt such a personal and deep connection, and so devastated by this tragedy. But of course, being based down all the way in Wiltshire when this happened, that he couldn't get here to be part of this community, to help support his community, he felt like he had to do something. And so, with permission from the family, he decided that he would walk 100 miles from his base down in Wiltshire through the likes of Swindon, stopping in Warwick, to here in Solihull, where today, a bit later on, they will lay a teddy bear and just have a short little service of remembrance with a few members of the family as well. But I spoke to Sergeant Brad Hawkins to find out about why he's done this and what it's been like doing the walk.
So obviously, being part of the King's West community is just essentially giving back to the families and the community itself, because watching them all come together it was emotional. Do you know what I mean? And me being down south in Tidworth, I couldn't give back in a sense. So I just thought to myself that I need to do something. It's been grueling at times. It's very much like mind over matter. At the start, it was kind of, it's just walking. Do you know what I mean? It'll be all right. And then I think 50 miles in, and blisters started appearing, swelling started coming. We've pushed past it. We got rid of the demons. I mean, the support as well. We've had lads keep joining us throughout the legs.
And what's kept you going through all of it?
Just getting to the end. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I put my mind to something, like, I want to finish it. And essentially that's what I want to do. If I'm in pain or not, I'll do it. Do you know what I mean? So that's the main reason. And it's for the families as well, and just being able to remember the boys.
And so there's around £2,000 that's been raised so far for Birmingham Children's Hospital on their Just Giving page of Sergeant Hawkins. They arrived in Solihull last night, and they'll, like I said, later today have that service of remembrance. And really, Sergeant Hawkins saying that the reason he wanted to do is to show that there is a different side to soldiers and reconnect with the community that he felt he couldn't do at the time of this awful tragedy.
Okay, Jack, thanks very much indeed. And what a great thing to do, actually.
Yeah.
And £2,000 or more, hopefully it might be by the end of today.
Yes.
Which will, just do some good for children in that area who are needing that help at the hospital.
And like you say, bring something good out of just something so tragic and so awful. And it often is soldiers, isn't it, stepping up and doing something really wonderful. So yes, thank you so much, Jack Carson, for bringing us that report. And there is a Just Giving page that you can find very easily on Google if you want to donate to that.
Yeah. Coming up, though, we're going to be looking at whether nature documentaries, wait for it, should come with a trigger warning, because it's upsetting some people.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
On Mark Dolan tonight in a world exclusive, Katie Price joins us live to talk fame, love, money, plastic surgery and her hopes for the future.
Get tuned in as for GB News. I'm meeting up with my old mate, Mark Dolan. It's been ages since I've done an interview with him.
That's Katie Price on Mark Dolan tonight on GB News.
Welcome back.
Well, that's going to be interesting.
You're very
isn't
relaxed
it?
down there. Look at you.
I am. I'm just a bit. Mark Dolan and Katie Price tonight.
He's back here.
That should be quite interesting.
You won't be up though because you're hidden here.
No,
in the
I won't
morning.
see it. I'll have to watch it on catch up or whatever. I voiced a documentary about Katie Price.
Did you really? And
So
how was that for you?
I don't know why they asked me to do it. It was one that had been made years ago and they got me to revoice it for some reason. I don't know.
You've got a very warm voice.
So it's
Maybe
me
that's
talking
why.
about Katie and her various operations.
So you're a bit of an expert, are you?
Well, I only read the script.
You should be on the panel tonight. Aidan McGee, Katie
Your
Price.
Aidan's going in.
Yeah.
Wonder why.
Yeah, he's looking forward to it as well. Wonder why.
Yeah, he could be
Anyway.
the next Mr. Price.
Mr. Price, yeah.
You never know.
I hear she's single now.
Is she now? I've lost
Yeah,
I've lost
I know.
track, actually.
Some reason I'm updated. I don't know why. Anyway, welcome back. You're watching Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Now, the BBC has been on the receiving end of a flurry of social media complaints for not including a trigger warning on a picture published in its wildlife magazine.
Okay, well, yes. Now, the social media users have been slammed by critics. What happened was the publisher didn't warn readers about an image of a leopard carrying a dead baboon in its jaw, whilst it's worth pointing out, actually, because it is important, that there was the baboon's baby is also clinging onto its now dead mother. So there you go. It's on screen for you now. If you're on the radio, it's
Literally as described, yeah.
Well, it is as described. So should there? Do these sort of things really need a trigger warning? Let's talk to nature expert and TV presenter Nick Baker. Nick, morning to you. I've got to say,
good morning.
This I don't know what you think. It strikes me as being absolute nonsense. Because this is real life, isn't it?
That's exactly it. I'm surprised you didn't give a trigger warning before showing that image there. You see, this is exactly it. It's why does one media source have to give a trigger warning and another not? The BBC are famous for their impartiality. That's the whole point, right? And if you're going to present nature, which is important to all of us, it's the world we live in, you have to show its spectacular and its beauty, as whether it's more, I guess, it's slightly more functional side as well. And that's what you call honest. It's effectively honest journalism. It's honest reporting. And a good photograph tells a story. And there's nothing, whilst it may not be everyone's cup of tea, that image tells a very strong story. So as far as a photograph goes of actual behaviour happening in the real world, it tells us an awful lot. Seeing this kind of...
The whole point of nature, as you say, it is beautiful, it is awe-inspiring, but it is also brutal. Mother Nature is very cruel at times, and we can't shy away from that. We can't sanitise that, can we?
Well, we can try, and we do. I mean, there's plenty of media outlets which do sanitise and tidy things up. I mean, you have to just go onto social media to see lots of nice pictures of fluffy cats. We like our world neat and tidy and clean, and we don't want to see the insides of things. We don't want to be made to feel uncomfortable. But actually, it is part of, well, I say we don't want to. Actually, quite a few of us do. We want to be telling the truth. But actually, it does take, it takes an honest approach to be able to show the real world it is. And this sort of backlash we're getting, I see as a symptom of our disconnect with nature. If you spend time out in the wild, you will see both sides of it. You will see both sides of the coin. You'll see the good stuff, the spectacular, and the awesome, the awe-inspiring, but you will also see the functionality, the brutality of nature as well.
Well, I wanted to pick you up on that point, Nick, being disconnected from nature in that way, because we are becoming increasingly, we live in cities, we're far away from nature as human beings now. And perhaps what we are seeing on Instagram, you say the cute photos of the dogs and cats, we see them all over our screens. We are so far away now, aren't we, from the brutal reality of nature. And maybe it's better to see the honest, stark reality of what our natural world is like.
I think it is, but there is another side to this, which is quite important to actually not put people off either. So it's about having a balance. It's about having people expect to see both the good and the bad. You can't just make it all fluffy and clean and nice, because then if you walk outside your front door and see something gruesome, it might be a sparrowhawk pulling the guts out of a robin. Enough to put someone into shock. But equally, that sparrowhawk in itself is quite a beautiful thing. And it's a conversation I have quite a lot with people that feed the birds in their garden, actually, which touches on this subject, which is, I love feeding the robins and the blue tits in my garden, but, that horrible sparrowhawk comes through and takes them every now and then, and I hate seeing that. It's like, well, that is a symptom of that same disconnect, because ultimately, if you've got a sparrowhawk eating those birds, you've actually got a healthy system. You should be celebrating the overall picture and not just the individuals. But as a species, we like to, I guess, Disney-fy our subjects somewhat. And I like to think if you're social media, you have a choice what you follow and what you don't follow. If you want to follow someone like the BBC feed, which will give you impartial information, impartial imagery, then expect to see the truth. But if you don't want to see that, then don't follow nature. I mean, I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I was just showing Ellie a video of a sparrowhawk eating a bird on my lawn a few months ago, and I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful thing to see. But there you go.
It is.
Well, we'll leave it there. Nick, thank you very much. Thank you for bearing with the slight delay in our system here, but good to talk to you.
Well, let us know what you think about that. I'm sure it's going to get a lot of you talking. gbnews@gbnews.uk. Should nature come with a trigger warning? And are we disconnected from nature? I thought that was a really interesting point, actually.
Yeah. Oh, crazy.
Crazy.
I think crazy. But anyway, your thoughts, please, if you would.
Well, the vegans won't agree with you, will they?
Well, yeah, but you can't expect a cheetah or whatever it was, a leopard, to be a vegan, can you?
No. Well, they might want to.
They'd be moaning if it was dying of starvation.
Starving, yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
Anyway, look, let us know what you think, and don't go anywhere, because we've got the papers heading away in just a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
8:39. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Very good morning to you.
We've got you talking about pronunciation, and I've got a joke for you.
Oh, go on.
It's from Gary, and Linda also had this joke as well. We're talking about the correct pronunciation of scone, and Gary says it's a scone until you eat it, and then it's gone. And Linda said the same as well.
Yeah. Rob says a scone you eat is the same pronunciation as a road cone, but with an S in front. You don't say road con. Cone. No, yeah, but it's not, though.
You could do that with a lot of English words. It gets quite complicated, doesn't it? Kathy says, OK...
Point, Rob, but you're wrong.
Kathy says, OK, Stephen, I can't cope with the shirtless video last night. And now the pronunciation of bourbon biscuit. How do you say it?
Bourbon.
Bourbon. Bourbon. They are pronounced bourbon. Thank you, Kathy. Good to see you back on Breakfast. We missed you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Keep your thoughts coming through gbviews at gbnews.uk. Time for the papers now with Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Morning, both. Liz, let's have a look at the Telegraph, should we?
Yeah.
And looking at the 3 threats to Rishi Sunak's government relaunch.
Yeah, this is an article by David Frost, you know, the one erstwhile chief Brexit negotiator. Yeah. He starts off with this, 3-paragraph metaphor about the Conservative Party in government, and it's like a car, and he's talking about revs and traction, and anyway, you get wade through that. I see what he's trying to say. He says, he's basically saying he doesn't use this word, so I'll introduce it as well. Not a car, but it's all a bit pedestrian. and it's just sort of bubbling over. And Rishi Sunak, of course, in the papers today.
Rishi Sunak.
Rishi Sunak, yeah. Yeah. The secret love child of Rick Astley. Anyway, and he said to people, look, you're not stupid. You know what we're contending with here, don't you? And then it's like, oh, he was calling people stupid and he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. Anyway, apart from that, he says, David Frost, there are actually some good things going on. You know, there is government in action, and he cites things like the decision to block the Scottish Government's so-called gender reform bill, the liberalising of financial service reforms, the online safety bill. It's not like really grabbing though, is it? No, but it's all good stuff, he's saying. But he says it'll all come down to, you know, it's the economy, stupid, in the end. If it can improve in the next 18 months, then they might be OK. They might get through. And people will vote with their wallets, won't they? But he also highlights that there's a lot of good news on the economy, which we were discussing earlier, good indicators. Inflation slowly creeping down and a lot better than in more than half of the 27 EU countries. The dollar against the pound's improved, the FTSE index is up. But he just recaps on what are the big challenges for Rishi Sunak, or however he's called. The first is immigration. A few tweeters today said, oh, all this thing about clamping down on illegal workers, a bit cynical, and you know, it's because he's not managing to curb immigration, actually. Anyway, the first, according to David Frost, is immigration. He's promised to stop the boats coming across the channel. He says it won't be easy, and we'll have to see how Suella Braverman gets on. The second is the whole thing about conversion therapy and kids. I don't think, is that the number 2 issue in the country? And the third is the Northern Ireland Protocol, which, you know, is very important to the people of Northern Ireland, but also he says it's important because Keir Starmer will try and, if the government fails to improve it, that Keir Starmer will use it as a tool, leverage to unravel Brexit, which we were discussing earlier with Fraser.
Talking of Keir Starmer, Fraser, also in the Telegraph, he's going to stop funding North Sea oil and gas.
Yeah, so Keir Starmer's gone all just stop oil on us, speaking to Davos. I think this is a really quite perplexing idea. I mean, obviously, we know that there's sort of net zero in the background. We're aiming to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But we've just been through this horrific energy crisis. I mean, we're not out the other end. And we know how dangerous it is to depend on the global market for things like oil and gas. And Britain is very rich in oil and gas. You know, I would have been, if I were Keir Starmer or any other leader of this country, I would have said we should be fracking for gas. We should be trying to find more gas, not, you know, closing that off as a possible future.
Well, we need to look at transitioning from one to the other, don't we?
I think that, you know, that's going to happen over a period of time, but there's no use in... If you stop investment, then, you know, that transition is going to be even more expensive. And the other thing is, you know, for now, if we're betting heavily on renewables, you do always need a backup for renewables. And at the moment, it's gas is the main one we use. Sometimes it's coal, because, unfortunately, the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine all the time. So you always have to have this sort of parallel energy system ready to step in. Ironically, it's usually in the winter where the sun is the lowest and the wind is the lowest. So that's why, you know, gas becomes really, really expensive every winter, because it's having to sort of play that backup role. We haven't actually got a solution to that yet, and there's not a technological solution to that exists yet. So, you know, I think potentially Keir Starmer is doing something potentially quite reckless here.
Interesting. Your thoughts on that, please. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I mean, I do think we've got to start transitioning.
Well, we have started, haven't we?
Yeah, but you've got to possibly speed it up a bit. I don't know whether that means, you know, new invest. Should there be new investment? You're right. We've got to have backups and things, but, you know, investment money should be investment capital should be going into what we need for the future, shouldn't it?
It is, but I mean, I think Starmer's an opportunist because Rishi Sunak hasn't gone to Davos. He's not there anyway at the moment, and Starmer's gone over with his shadow chancellor Rachel Reeves, and they're going creeping round all the big banks and meeting and going. Yeah, well,
you would though, wouldn't you?
Well, he's not the government. But anyway, and promising, oh, we're going to reach net zero and all the rest of it. OK, well, I just think to say we're not going to give out any more licences for exploration of gas and oil in the North Sea. It's OK to do that once you're confident you've got an energy supplier. Meanwhile, there are people not turning on the central heating and, you know, advice from the health safety executive or whatever this week, please keep your house at 18 if you're elderly, don't freeze to death. And I bought somebody a gilet for Christmas that's heated.
Body warmer.
Yeah. I didn't realise he had to be plugged into the base. So he thinks I was trying to kill him. But now he can sit and work at home with his gilet plugged into the wall and not have to have the radiator on or the fan heater on.
He doesn't get up in a hurry.
He did. He nearly strangled himself.
Oh, no.
Talking of things to wear...
Yes, good, yes.
In the sun.
Right, well, I'm really torn about this. I haven't made my mind up, but I've just got to think about it. Right. So, well, music, rock and roll, has always been about sex. They've always used sex to sell records. Elvis Presley and his hips, you know, and in the 70s, I mean, on Top of the Pops, you look back now, I have to avert my eyes because the guys in bands, the trousers were so tight. It was disgusting.
Oh, yes.
But now it's the women, and for several years, I think since the Spice Girls, perhaps, I've thought, it's just getting a bit much. So now, to sell a record, do you have to wear stuff like this? So is this like feminism in action? Are these women empowered by this? Are they just reaching new depths to sell records? I mean, do you have to show your gusset to get into the top 40 is the question.
It's interesting because
what do you think? I mean, we can't come on in the morning, can we? Just like
no,
that.
but the thing is, but a lot of the fans of these female artists, a lot of
are young, impressionable girls.
Are girls, so they're not selling it to
not
boys.
for the dads.
No, but is that empowering girls to say, it's all right, you can go out dressed like this? Or is it saying, in order to get on in life, you have to put all your goods in the shop window? Now, you know, I am not a prude.
No, you're
so
not
this
a prude.
Is a genuine debate in my own mind.
I always just think with these sort of things, and it's when people go, it's how many fathers, it must be every father in the country pretty much who's got a daughter or mother has said, you're not going out in that.
Yeah. Well,
and you have to ask, why?
We saw some girls going to school the other day and they had kilts on in North Wales. She said, that school's got a new uniform. And all the girls had done exactly what we did when we were teenagers, rolled them up. Yeah. So they were, like, up here. But we had to kneel on the floor at the convents and they used to measure the distance from the floor to your skirt and make you turn it down. So, yes, I just think, is this a good example or not? It's a genuine question.
Well, Cher did it, didn't she?
Yeah.
Back in the day, turn back time.
Yeah, she looked fabulous.
She did, but she was wearing nothing but a pair of tights and a stitch of black fabric. As she sat on a gunship. It's a fantastic video, but I mean, it's outrageous.
Would you like it if, like, big rock bands, male, came on stage in their, you know, in their underpants?
Well, they take the tops off and things a lot, don't they?
Yeah.
Same thing, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, let us know what you think. We've got to leave it there, sadly. Liz Kershaw, Fraser Myers, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
I'm taking all your clothes off. Unless I'm making a video for Twitter.
Yes. I was about to say, says the man who was topless last night on Twitter and Instagram. Yes. Anyway, very amusing. Lots of people enjoyed that, I think, Steve.
Or not.
Across the nation.
Let's bring you up to date with some of the headlines. At 8:50, the Office for National Statistics has released the latest retail figures. Sales dropped 1% in December. That's worse than experts had predicted. 1.7% lower than pre-COVID levels. Non-food store sales fell by 2.1%.
Lancashire police are reportedly looking into the video of Rishi Sunak not wearing a seatbelt whilst in a moving car. The Prime Minister was filming a social media clip on his way to yesterday's levelling up announcement in the North West. He's already apologised, with his spokesman saying he's made an error of judgment.
And the deadline to restore Northern Ireland's power sharing at Stormont has passed without agreement. The UK government must now call another assembly election within 12 weeks. The Northern Ireland Secretary could delay that in the hope the government and EU can strike a deal on the protocol.
Now, the wait is over. The final list of nominations have been released for this year's Bafta Awards, and now we know who's in the running for the most prestigious film award.
Well, All Quiet on the Western Front from Netflix has come out on top. 14 nominations, making it the first film to score 14 or more Bafta nods since The King's Speech back in 2011. Let's have a look at the phenomenally tragic tale. Well, it's created a big storm for award season. Let's get the lowdown from Stephanie Tetchy. Morning.
Morning, Stephen and Ellie.
Why is it that I've not heard of this?
I know. You know what? This
it's
was
so
very,
huge.
It was very much the wild card, actually. You know, sometimes with these award shows, there's always, you know, you have the ones that you expect to do well, like your Elvis, your Tar with Kate Blanchett. But this one, All Quiet on the Western Front, it's something that's been quite gripping. People who've watched it said it's a very poignant film. And what even makes it more interesting that it scored so many awards, it's not in English. It's in German. It's in German. So the fact that it's managed still to connect with audiences on that level and with the jury as well is just fascinating. But every year it's interesting to get these wild cards.
It's a bit like that, I can't remember what it's called now, but that South Korean film a couple of years ago.
I forgot what it was. And that's
but that was amazing.
Award season, and sometimes it just goes to show films translate past language barriers. It's just all about the plot and how it's been shot, because it's up for nominations such as Best Film, Casting, Costume Design, Editing and Cinematography. So sometimes it's bigger than the plot. But I never tend to get excited at this stage because you get a lot of films who get a lot of nominations and on the night they might just pick 3 or 4. But there's still other films which I think that will do quite well, including The Banshees of Inisherin. So on the long list, this had about 14 nominations. It stars Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, and has been directed by Martin McDonagh. And it tells the tale of two friends who stop being friends, but there's more of a sinister reason for it.
Have you watched this one?
I really want to see it, Ellie.
See, I watched it, I think, 2 or 3 nights ago. It's very odd.
Yeah,
very odd. It's one of these, and they often come out, don't they, Stephanie, where it's very artsy. And I think there was definitely a lot of deeper meaning in there somewhere.
I think there is. I can't wait to watch it, and I almost want to find out the plot.
I'll be very interested to find out what you think.
Yeah, because I don't understand. OK, they used to be friends, and now they've fallen out, so it's a bit of a... I don't know what's happened. It feels a bit... Brokeback Mountain-y kind of. But Colin Farrell is up for leading actor for it, and Brendan Gleeson is also up for supporting actor. So I think that will do well. That's got 10 nominations. And then obviously we have our favourite categories, such as leading actress.
Oh, yes.
Kate Blanchett so far has done well with Tar for her performance as Lydia Tar, the controversial German orchestra conductor. But the film is up for 5 nominations. But she faces stiff competition from people like Viola Davis in the Woman King, which I absolutely love. Also, she's up against Ana de Armas for her portrayal of Marilyn Monroe as blonde, and that was very intense viewing. But one name that has been really good during award season is Michelle Yeoh.
Oh, she got a Globe,
Yeah,
didn't
she got a Globe, and she stars in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think you might like this film, Stephen. It's about time travel. So she plays this interdimensional time traveller who's on a bid to rescue her daughter. So I think she will do quite well because this film has got 10 nominations as well.
Yeah, that is my cup of tea. Plus, I'm a big fan of Michelle Yeoh. I think she's a fantastic actress.
She's an amazing actress. She starred in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I think, actually. So, yeah, I think she will do quite well on the night. And then, obviously, we have the other big category, which is leading actor. And so, you know, Elvis has been the most talked about biopic over the past year.
It didn't do that well at the box office, though, did it?
Not that great as people thought it was, but I think it's more the hype around it. But Austin Butler, obviously, he won the Golden Globe, and there's been much more attention around it since Lisa Marie Presley's passing. So I think he may do well, but the big person who people are talking about is Brendan Fraser for his critically acclaimed performance in The Whale.
And it would be nice to see him do well, actually, for a whole host of reasons.
Definitely, because he snubbed the Golden Globes because obviously he's had a bit of tension with the former president, Philip Burke, who he made accusations of apparently he groped him. But I think this will now be his time to shine in Hollywood and in England.
Yes, absolutely. Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. Always a joy. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Look forward to that. We've got the top stories heading your way in just a moment. This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
EU citizens living in the UK without visas will now face the real threat of deportation.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. It's Friday, the 20th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, GB News can exclusively reveal that immigration enforcement officers will start cracking down on EU citizens living and working in the UK without the right paperwork. But what will it mean for our post-Brexit relationship with the rest of Europe?
We've got the results of the People's Poll. We've been asking, do you agree with how the government have dealt with Scotland's gender recognition bill?
The latest retail figures for December have been released in the last hour with a surprise fall over the festive period. How worried should we be about the impact on the economy?
And the Olympic legend Roger Black joins us this morning to explain why we should be looking after our mental health as much as our physical health.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, is expected to pledge that as Prime Minister, he would launch a new initiative with the explicit goal of reducing the price of energy.
Well, let's talk to Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade, Nick Thomas-Symonds, who joins us now. Good morning to you. Wow, well, as a headline, everyone's going to cheer that on. Cheaper energy. How does all this work?
Well, firstly, Stephen, it's very good to join you. It's good to see you back on the Breakfast show and fully recovered. So lovely to be on.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
A pleasure. Well, let me just say in respect of the Clean Power Alliance, because this is very, very important. It has two explicit goals. One is about energy security. We've all seen the problem of allowing our energy supplies across the world to be at the whims of dictators like Putin and the damage that has caused. And secondly, it is about driving down prices for consumers, for every household in the country. Now, we achieve that by working together with countries across the world that share our goal of getting to clean energy sources by 2030. So countries like the Netherlands, for example, Denmark, Portugal, Kenya, these are all countries that have already set out they share that goal. And what we can do then is we can share information between us on the emerging technologies like things like carbon capture and storage. We can work together to secure investment. But what we can also do collectively is to get resilience in supply chains. All countries doing this will need access to critical minerals. We can't allow vulnerability in our supply chains. That's something we can achieve with a Clean Power Alliance, and that's what the next Labour government will do.
I'm sure many people will agree with you that we need to look to the future now. We need to look towards clean energy sources. But right now, there are people in their homes who are struggling to heat them, simply can't keep up with the price of energy. We're in this energy crisis. And we know all too well, don't we, the dangers of depending on foreign oil and gas. We are rich in our own oil and gas in the North Sea, but Sir Keir Starmer speaking today saying he doesn't want to use that any longer as a source. Doesn't that seem backwards in what we're dealing with right now? Isn't it time to harness our own rich resources?
Well, firstly, in relation to the immediate situation, it was Labour that was calling for the energy price freeze and pushing the government into announcing that. So we're very aware of the help that people need immediately. And by the way, we've also been calling too for the Chancellor to rule out a rise in fuel duty on hard-pressed motorists. So we'll continue to make the case for immediate action. But the reality is that we are facing a crisis of energy security. We're also looking to vitally tackle climate change. And in order to be able to achieve both those goals, we need a clean energy sprint. This government has fallen behind in that. It's only recently they lifted the ban on onshore wind that had been in place since 2015. They haven't put into place the appropriate gas storage that they should have done, for example. But now is the time to get those clean energy sources that we need for the future. And that both tackles climate change, but it also gives us energy security and drives down prices for consumers too.
on another matter, and I don't know if you've seen this, it's only just broken in the last few minutes. Unite has announced 10 new strike dates for ambulance staff. That's on top of the strikes they'd already announced, including one which is going to start, as you'll be aware, on Monday. What do you make of all of this? I mean, do you support as an individual? Does the Labour Party support this action now? Because it's clearly politically very difficult for the Labour Party, this, isn't it?
What's important in this situation is that it is a badge of shame for the government that you have workers in our healthcare sector, people who've gone in to the profession because they want to care for other people, who find themselves driven to these lengths in terms of taking strikes and indeed announcing potential strikes. What the government has to do is strain every sinew to prevent these strikes from taking place. And so far, what we've had from the government is either sitting on the sidelines and pretending that this industrial situation has nothing to do with them, or they've been aggravating the situation and making it worse. It is time to sit down and do that hard work of finding a negotiated solution. And the government has to redouble its efforts and do that now.
Having to fork out. I mean, we're in this situation, aren't we? I mean, one thing we're trying to avoid is wage inflation, adding on to the already strong inflationary pressures we're already feeling. I mean, you can understand it's as a party seeing yourself now as a government in waiting, whether you are or not, we shall find out in the course of time. But you have to really start assessing where the money comes from in all of this, don't you?
Well, look. Firstly, in terms of the next general election, the only poll that matters is the one that actually takes place on the day of that general election, Stephen. But in terms of these wider disputes, I used to be a barrister. I represented many people in negotiations. I was a mediator too, so I've seen these disputes from a more neutral position as well. And in each and every one, you never came out of the room where both parties to a dispute got all that they wanted. That isn't how negotiations work. And what has to happen here is you have to get around that table to find where the compromise solution might be. You contrast that kind of approach to what this government did, where Unison, for example, the healthcare union, was saying to the government only recently that they would call off their strike, not on the basis of being given a particular offer. They would literally have called off the strike if the government was willing to sit down with them and start that process, and the government did not do so. The government has to engage and find where those compromise positions are.
Along with you, but I wanted to quickly ask about the video of Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister up in the northwest yesterday, filmed on social media not wearing a seatbelt. He has already apologised for doing so, but it is being investigated by local police. Do you think that he should be fined?
Well, that's obviously a matter for the police, but that could well be, if that happens, that would be the second fine that the Prime Minister will have had, in addition to the fine that he received for his conduct during the parties in Number 10. But it really does show, doesn't it, this Prime Minister, because it's yet another PR video. I mean, I remember the PR video where he was trying, as I recollect, to hold a contactless card up against a barcode scanner. I mean, these are just frankly, just PR stunts, when what the Prime Minister should be doing is actually dealing with the substance of governing. I would say he should have been perhaps travelling or considering travelling by rail, but when you look at the mess the Conservatives have made of the railways, perhaps that's not such a surprise. But here we are, 13 years into a Conservative government, and I doubt we could name a single public service that's in a better condition now than it was in 2010. So my message to the Prime Minister is stay away from these attempted PR stunts and actually concentrate on a serious business of governing.
OK. Nick Thomas-Symonds, it's good to see you, as always. Thanks very much
indeed. Good to see you too. Thank you.
Let's see what our political reporter Olivia Utley makes of all of that. Olivia?
Well, it's certain now that Labour is very much in sort of electioneering mode, and got to say they are sounding serious, and to many it's quite sensible. And this plan for a sort of clean energy revolution comes off the back of plenty of other quite big reforming plans from Labour. So we have Wes Streeting, of course, on the NHS, basically taking away the idea of GPs as gatekeepers. I mean, that would be a huge change to the NHS. We had John Ashworth on his plans for reforming the welfare system, which, again, essentially involved ripping up the way that job centres work and starting again from scratch. Then we have Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, talking about offering free childcare from 0 to 11, which, again, is hugely sort of revolutionary. So what I'm seeing here from Labour is a sort of spirit of the zeal of reform, which is quite similar to what we saw from Blair in the 90s. Very clear that Labour means business. Of course, there are some questions. There are definitely questions about costing all of this. We know that the net zero agenda has proved to be sort of enormously expensive. And as you mentioned there, Ellie, you know, people at home are all very well. They want a clean energy revolution. But for now, they're just worried about heating their homes through the winter. Will it actually be possible to go further down the clean energy net zero route, as Labour is suggesting, while, you know, keeping money in the country's coffers and keeping people's houses heated? There will be those questions for Labour as we get closer to an election, as it becomes, you know, that will become more serious. How are they actually going to do any of these things? But for now, compared to the sort of disastrous PR stunt that Rishi Sunak had yesterday, Labour is looking quite serious.
Yeah, well,
serious,
interesting.
But is there trouble on the horizon? I mean, with the NHS crisis at the moment, I mean, the left of the party just want to see a massive cash injection, don't they, for NHS salaries? Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's talking about privatisation, or, I mean, that's going to be an issue. And then we're also looking at how we reform the NHS. I mean, is the maths there?
Well, absolutely. I think just to take your first bit of what you're saying there, that you're quite right to point at the divided Labour. I think because Keir Starmer has gone to such huge lengths to sort of rid the party of Corbynism, we sort of think that project is completed. But it's anything but. Corbyn's years in power, well, as the leader of Labour, left the party in a really divided state, and you saw some really very left-wing people in the Labour Party, while you've still got people like Wes Streeting, who are very much on the right of the party. So whether it'll be possible for Keir Starmer to govern with, you know, Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting in his cabinet is another question. They are going to come up with all of these problems. For example, NHS reform. Wes Streeting's plan could be a Tory plan. It could be something from David Cameron's lips.
Yeah.
Will the left of the party agree with that?
It's going to be interesting times ahead, as always. Olivia, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, immigration enforcement officers have been issued with new guidance allowing for the detention and removal of EU nationals in the UK who are working here illegally.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, was given exclusive access to follow immigration officers as they raided businesses in London, arresting 2 EU citizens who officers said were in the UK without work visas.
We're on board with immigration officers in South East London as they prepare to raid several businesses suspected of employing illegal immigrants. Arriving at this skip hire firm, these officers have to move fast if they're to stop their suspects disappearing. Searching all the possible hiding places as they go. Among those they're looking for, at least 2 Albanians. Immigration enforcement officers believe one of the men has run off.
Yeah, have you got a picture of it?
The other is behind the wheel of this vehicle, but a quick check reveals he has a proper work visa. Elsewhere, the rest of the workforce have gathered in this porta cabin as immigration officers check their status.
We're going to take you into this room and just speak to you in here, yeah?
After speaking to this Romanian, he was placed under arrest on suspicion of working in the UK without a proper visa. The senior immigration enforcement officer here told us they've now been issued with new guidance, allowing for the arrest of EU nationals living and working here illegally. Conservative MP Lee Anderson, who's on the Commons Home Affairs Select Committee, welcomed this apparent change in policy.
Well, it's welcome news, because if EU citizens are here and they are working and they should not be working, then quite frankly they're breaking the law. And this problem is much bigger than we think, I believe. I believe that this is happening up and down the country, in every town and village and city. There's a hidden population of people who are working that should not be working.
Following Brexit, EU nationals arriving in the UK must have the appropriate visas if they want to live and work here. And although border officials have detained some EU nationals at ports and airports they suspect of planning to work here illegally, those EU citizens already in the UK but working without permission have not been pursued by immigration enforcement until now. At a second nearby business, immigration officers have arrested another Romanian suspected of working illegally. It signals a tougher approach from Rishi Sunak's government after he promised to crack down on those abusing UK immigration laws. But with well over 1 million people suspected of living and working in the illegal economy, these immigration enforcement officers have never been busier. Mark White, GB News, South East London.
But look, don't go anywhere, because when we return, we're going to be talking to Olympian Roger Black, talking about not only physical well-being, but mental well-being.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, we all like to be healthy, but there's a survey out today says not very many of us are sort of overly concerned about our mental health. Should that be a problem? I don't know. Someone who's campaigning on this is Olympic legend Roger Black, who joins us now. Really good to see you this morning, Roger. No, well, it's true. Three Olympic medals. Blowing heck. You should wear them all the time. Now, I'm quite intrigued by this survey because if people aren't worried about their mental health, does that just mean they're in a good place?
Yeah, I guess so. I think so. I think the point of the survey is that at this time of year, people make resolutions to get fitter, and what they've noticed is the shift now is not just about physical fitness. A lot of people will recognise the connection between physical health and mental health, and in fact, taking regular exercise is such an important part of not just being healthier physically, but nowadays being healthier mentally. And I think there's something in that. I mean, when I was an athlete, it was a long time ago. I wouldn't say it was particularly good for my mental health to be training as hard as I did, but I was focused on trying to win medals. It's very different for me now. I mean, I'm nearly 57, and for me, I exercise. I try and go for a little run every day just to keep moving and just keep exercising. It's nothing like what I used to do, but I recognise now that it's as much now for my mental health as it is to my physical health.
Yeah, and Roger, how important is it to look at your health holistically like that? So not only think, I can run 5K in this amount of time, but also to check in with yourself in your mind and be like, am I okay up here as well?
Yeah, I think it's all about balance, and I think life is balance, and I think maybe people are recognising now the balance is moving not away from physical health, but it's recognising that mental health, the two go together. Certainly as an athlete, I mean, the best athletes in the world, I mean, everyone at the Olympics is really good. So often it's the one who are in the best mental state who are able to do it. We've seen that. Yeah, look at Andy Murray, what he's done in Australia overnight. At his age, to come back from his injury, that isn't just a physical. He hasn't just overcome a physical problem. His mental toughness is extraordinary. The two go hand in hand. But I think getting regular, checking up on your health is the first point. And the survey that's been done recently by Bupa Health Clinics is recognising that it's really important to get checked up first before you embark on exercise and have an awareness of how your health is, because we do change as we age. So, checking how you are and then keeping exercising is something that really we should all be trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And sadly, Roger, we're squeezed for time, so that's it.
Yeah.
I wish we had. Will you come back on the show one weekend, one Saturday or Sunday, and have a general chit chat about all this sort of thing?
Always happy to. Always happy to. Yeah, always happy to have a chit chat. Nice to be asked.
Lovely.
Thanks,
well,
Roger.
Consider yourself booked. We'll get a date to you. Thank you very much indeed.
All right.
And a great message as well, isn't it?
It is. Holistic.
Yeah, I like that word as well.
There you go. Me and Ellie are back with you tomorrow morning at 6. Tom Harwood's here next.
Good morning. Another frosty day out there. Frosty Friday, but a sunny Friday as well. Ice is a hazard again this morning, and there's a few fog patches around, and we'll see more of those forming overnight tonight. Bit of a messy picture on the pressure pattern. We're kind of between two weather systems, a little bit of a ridge of high pressure, which is bringing most of us a fine day. But this low out in the North Sea is going to throw just a few showers grazing easternmost parts of England and still bring a cold wind here. Some sleet and snow still possible in those showers as well. But for most places, it's dry, it's fine. It's sunny. There are some thick fog patches around this morning, and they will take a while to clear. But for most, it's a day of feeling the apricity, the feeling of sunshine in winter. Temperatures 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, maybe 7 or 8 across the southwest. Feeling colder than that, though, with that wind along some of these North Sea coasts. And very quickly, temperatures will drop tonight. So if you're heading out, be prepared for it to be frosty. The blue taking hold of the chart. Frost pretty much everywhere. Again, a hard frost in places. And there will be some fog, probably a bit more overnight tonight, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Notice a change to damper weather as rain trickles into the far northwest. That'll help to keep the temperatures up here, but elsewhere, a cold start to the weekend. That fog, where it forms, will be slow to clear on Saturday as well, particularly across the heart of England through the Welsh Marches. So just be aware of that on Saturday. Apart from the fog, most of England and Wales looking dry and sunny on Saturday. Clouds spilling in, though, to Scotland and Northern Ireland with rain, mostly light rain, particularly in western parts of Scotland. But it is turning milder and breezier here, 7 or 8 the high, whereas for the bulk of England and Wales, 4 or 5 at best. And if the fog sticks, going to struggle to get much above freezing. Slowly but surely, these weather fronts are bringing milder air to the north. But although it'll turn milder here on Sunday, it stays cold in the southeast.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
With levelling up